Okay, folks, it's 6 p.m. This committee of the whole meeting has been called to order. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Staff, will you please call the roll?
Patrick.
Here.
Amy Collins. Liz Carroll.
Here.
Joe Ellenboss.
Present.
Lindsey Graham Ellenboss. Here. Colton Kaltenfeld.
Here.
Greg Kelly.
Present.
Maya Morales.
Present.
John Muchler.
Here.
Hannah Ordos.
Here.
Joel Fitzjordan.
Here.
Andrew Redding. Jessica Rienstra. Here. Rod Stump. Jennifer Wright. Here.
Okay, we'll now move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any questions, comments, concerns for tonight's agenda? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the agenda by consent? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So now we'll move on to public comment. Members of the public can address the commission on topics related to the Whatcom County Charter. Tonight, we're going to stick to our 20 minutes in order to give respect to our guest speakers who are joining us from different time zones. So if there's more to be said, we'll make time for that after the presentations. Staff, is there anyone present who has signed up to speak?
Jeff Margolis. There's a microphone up there if you'd like it. You don't have to use it.
Thank you for this opportunity. Very briefly, a lot of things in politics have what I consider latent functions, and things come up which aren't quite, so they seem obvious, but there are things about them that aren't obvious, and the things that aren't obvious that I'd like you to take into consideration is how we build the historical culture of Whatcom County and how we give citizens a sense of tradition over time. And it comes through their face-to-face involvement. So when you have the opportunity to make a choice about the direction of communication and who is involved, I'd like you to give a lot of credence to developing our regional cultural history, and think of the ways in which the process you're deliberating about bring the people of Whatcom County together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Brianna Anderson. I'll pass. Eric Warden.
Hello, no crayons this time. That was a few weeks ago. I'm here to tell a story about football history as it relates to government change. At the beginning of the 1900s, in the game of football, the forward pass was not legal, but the lateral pass was legal at that time. And in those days, the game of football was a lot different than it is now. Then one of the main strategies was for the offense to smash through the defensive line. And it was a very dangerous game. In 1905, there were 19 college players that were killed in football games during that season. And it was so dangerous that there was calls to ban the game of football. The president of the United States at that time, Theodore Roosevelt, personally intervened he called to the colleges to change the rules of the game, and 60 colleges did get together in a meeting that year and to change the rules, and that was the beginning of the NCAA, by the way. And they, at that time, made the forward pass legal. Now, when that happened, the coaches didn't really get it right away. They started to use it a little bit, but they kind of used it like a trick play. They didn't really incorporate it into their new strategy, except for one guy. He was at St. Louis University. He incorporated it in the very first year in 1906. And he went undefeated. His team was undefeated, 11-0 that year. And at the end of the season, he had outscored his opponents 407-11. Because he had the vision of what forward pass could do. The other coaches were slower to pick this up. It took about 10 years for other people to get the new system. But eventually, the forward pass became central game, now in a game of skill and speed, not just brute force like the old days. And I thought of this story. I hope it seems of relevance to you. When I think of proportional representation, to me, it can change the game if you have a vision to see the changes that it makes. So I hope that you will take the chance tonight to change the game of our politics. Thank you.
Thank you. And Murray.
Good evening, Charter Review. My name is Ken Murray. I live on U Street Hill, and I've lived in Whatcom County since 1988. I was under the impression that the topic of choice here was ranked choice voting for tonight. So I'm going to stick to that and make it pretty quick. My personal opinion is, that democracy is here to give the majority the rule and the minority the rights. Ranked choice voting takes away the competition and therefore takes away my rights as a minority in this voting process. Too many times the majority dominates the ranked choice voting, and therefore the conservatives or the liberals, whichever side is in the majority, takes over, and it doesn't give a fair competitive result. And along with this, I understand you guys will be talking about the two council at-large positions. That too falls along with the same thing as not giving much competition for the minority. Thank you very much, and I hope you take my heed.
You can.
Wendy Shop.
Thank you for holding this meeting and taking the time and effort to delve into the topic of RCV. My name is Wendy Zopp, and I'm here tonight to learn more about the topic myself and to hear your thoughts and questions about it. I love living in Whatcom County, and I'm interested in keeping things mostly the same. This is awesome here. I do think, though, that ranked choice voting is a modest reform that's worth serious consideration. I feel it could help more people here be better represented by county government. I've heard some people make public comments at these meetings about ranked choice voting being too confusing to voters. And I'm surprised by this. I think Whatcom County voters can handle the concept of voting for candidates in preferential order. I think we're just as smart and capable as people who live and vote in locations where RCV is used. We have smart and capable elections administrators. I think that they provide the educational materials and support needed to inform the electorate about how to cast their votes under this system and how those votes will be counted. Thank you again for holding the meeting, and please give the voters of Whatcom County a chance to consider RCV for county elections by putting it on our November ballot.
Thank you, Wendy.
Jesse Post.
Hello, thank you, Charter Review Commissioners, for spending your time volunteering to serve your community. My name is Jessie Post. I live in Ferndale. I am here to speak briefly in favor of using ranked choice voting. Building off of what Wendy said, I know some of the concerns have been that it might be too confusing a system for some folks. And I want to speak to some of my personal experience. I'm a volunteer with Fair Vote. You'll see Fair Vote pretty well represented at these meetings. And we are in favor of using ranked choice voting. And through my volunteer work with them, I've tabled at many different events in Whatcom County, and I have spoken to people about ranked choice voting, and most people get it very, very quickly once you just tell them you rank candidates in your order of preference. And we often have sample ballots where we allow children to try different candies and then rank their favorite candies. And I have watched very young, like elementary school age children successfully use a ranked choice ballot with really no instruction other than go ahead and rank your favorite candies. So I think that it's a bit of a disservice to the voters of Whatcom County to say that they wouldn't be able to handle this system, what is really a very intuitive concept. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing the discussion today.
Thank you, Jessie.
Element Conchi.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for considering this issue. My name is Alan Conkey. I founded the Fair Vote chapter here in Whatcom County 9 years ago. And with some of the volunteers you've seen here tonight, we've been talking with voters in this county for so long. We talk probably with thousands of voters, and they want this. People are excited about this. People can understand it. We're just asking you to, do your jobs here, which is to really think about how to do this right. What is the best plan for our county? We have so many great experts coming here tonight. I'm really excited to hear about them. And this is the time, the pace that we need to set. We need to think about this. You should all get as informed as you can. We don't want to rush that at all. I want you to take your time with this. But we're ready. The voters are ready to vote on this, and we just ask you to put something to the voters. I've been hearing all of these concerns about the at-large seats as well, and I agree with most of those concerns as well. The at-large voting does feel like it is the majority overriding the minority. And I know that some of you who are maybe thinking that that's going to solve the problems are going to be waiting to that later meeting. I just ask you to consider some of the proposals that we have here tonight, the multi-winner, the proportional ranked voting. It does get rid of the at-large seats. And so I'm just kind of speaking to you as a commission, but also to those other voters out there who are concerned about this. Take some time to look at this. I think it does solve those concerns that people have about at-large voting. We can get rid of the at-large seats and use these multi-winner districts and fairly get representation for the minority and the majority. So yeah, please, looking forward to all the presentations tonight, and I'll be as brief as I can. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Joshua Darling.
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us all to chat. Excuse me. There has been some chat around the cognitive lift that is required to get people to do the ranked choice voting. I don't think the people of Whatcom County are too unintelligent to comprehend the idea of ranked choice voting. However, ballot fatigue is a real problem. Second to that there's an opportunity that comes up for folks who are less than scrupulous, who could strategically game the system in ranked choice voting by presenting, I'm not sure why there's a lot of feedback, sorry, by presenting a good number of candidates that are all functionally the same and creating one party dominance in an area. So there is a concern for cost, there's a concern for transparency, there is a concern for ballot fatigue, which is a real problem, but additionally to that, there is a very easy way to game the system with ranked choice voting. And it's telling that 13 states as of March 25th have banned ranked choice voting. And these are not all red states. These are a mix of red states and blue states. So I'd urge you to reconsider this idea. Thank you.
So we are gonna move to online signups. Liam Dyfus, you're first. Please go ahead.
Speaking. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Liam Deepice. I graduated from Linden Christian High School, and I'm here to comment about ranked choice voting. I think it would be a really good thing to have ranked choice voting on the November ballot because it does not at all take away voters' options, but rather expands them by allowing voters to say more about their interests with a single vote. It allows, let's say, a voting bloc that comprises a small minority of the electorate to still have their votes be used if their preferred candidate doesn't have enough support. So in this way, it leads to the winners of elections having more consensus among the entire bodies of voters, including minority factions. I would strongly second the earlier opinion that proportional representation is a good step, and I think that proportional ranked choice voting would be preferable to single winner ranked choice voting in the system that would hypothetically go on the ballot in November. And I understand this is something that's difficult for the Whatcom County government to do if there's a lot of apprehension floating around about a voting system that we haven't used before that still has yet to receive widespread use in the US. But evidence shows that when ranked choice voting has been implemented in other places like Alaska or Maine, a lot of that apprehension evaporates once people actually use it and experience how it works and the benefits that it has on a place's political culture and the representation and voice that voters have in their government. So I yield my time. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Liam.
Next is Alicia Smith, followed by John Ramsey. Elisa, please go ahead, Alicia.
Hi, my name's Alicia Smith, and my opinion is I do not want rank choice voting. I find it confusing. And what I really want is to go back to single day voting in our precincts, physical ballots, and voter ID. And so I really wish the council would put forward something in regards to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
Next is John Ramsey, followed by Sandy Phillips. John, give me 1 second. Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So ranked choice voting, I am recommending against the adoption of ranked choice voting for Whatcom County for a number of reasons. First being complexity can be harder for voters to understand compared to simple plurality voting, potentially leading to confusion or errors in ranking. Second issue is ballot exhaustion. The issue if a voter ranks only a few candidates and those are eliminated early, their ballot may no longer count in later rounds, effectively disenfranchising them, the ones who choose it in that way. Another issue is counting delays, and we don't need more of those in Whatcom County. We've had enough of those, in my opinion, in the past. Tabulating results can take longer, especially in close races, due to the iterative redistribution process. There is a potential for misinterpretation. We also see that that's an issue in Washington State already on many ballots. This would only add complexity. Some voters may feel that their lower ranked choices hurt their top choice, though this isn't supposed to be how the system works. A big one is implementation costs. Washington State is not flush with cash, as we know, nor is Whatcom County. We don't need to add something that's controversial and potentially, I do believe it disenfranchises the minority. It takes away the minority voice in a significant manner. So we don't need to be having additional costs for voting, updating voting machines, educating voters, and training election officials. All those things can be expensive. And finally, it doesn't eliminate all the issues. while it reduces some strategic voting, that is, that people will try to somehow game the system, um, sophisticated voters might still manipulate rankings in certain scenarios, like voting only one candidate. I don't understand exactly how it works, but apparently there are ways to game also the ranked choice voting system. I imagine from the response of one of the experts that he may have something to address to that. But ultimately, I also believe that we live in a county that has become a purple county. Um, it is no longer ruled in that way, in that we're not represented in that way, and we have effectively in the county council now, and this is, I'm bringing up a separate issue for later, we have effectively four seats elected by Bellingham and three seats elected by the county. And I don't believe that that can be seen in any way as true representation of the people of Whatcom County. And ranked choice voting, when you look at the places where it's been implemented, they tend to be places where more progressive ideas are brought forward. I don't believe this serves the people of Whatcom County. I don't believe it's fiscally sound. I believe it's working well. We're a republic. We're not a democracy. People talk about a lot about democracy. Democracy is part of our republic, but it's not everything. And it's the downside of democracy. It becomes ruled by the majority at the exclusion of the minority. That's not what our republic is founded on. We want to have majority vote with representation and rights of the minority. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your service in such an important the charter review. I yield my
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Sandy Phillips, followed by Misty Flowers. You can unmute yourself.
How about now?
Yes.
It's terrible when I can't be heard by the commissioners. I've missed being able to talk to you. I'm Sandy Phillips, also known as Sandy Brewer. I'm a resident of District 4. And I was going to speak generally in the first comments, but I'll go straight to ranked choice voting myself. Those of you who know me know that, among other things, I am an independent voter. I don't call myself a Republican or a Democrat. And I prefer to look at the issues and at the people, all the people, regardless of party. I have found that actually both parties, the party faithful, if I may use that term, stand against ranked choice voting because they lose control over the electorate by not having that R or D and one candidate representing each. I think that ranked choice voting, first off, is very easy to understand. I've been a part of some fraternal organizations where that's the way things are done when electing officers. And it's easy to understand. There will be initial costs. There are initial costs in anything that requires a little bit of education. But in the long run, I think that this is the way to give every citizen an equal voice. Because if their first candidate, second candidate, etc., doesn't make it, they still have some skin in the game. So I urge you to put this on the ballot in November and let the voters decide whether they like it or not. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk to you, and I'll be listening.
Thank you, Sandy.
Christie, please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your attention on this really important subject. And I say that I am definitely opposed to ranked choice voting. I don't think that it's going to better represent the minority vote or minority voice. It doesn't solve any of the problems, and it only exacerbates them while posing entirely new threats to free, fair, and secure elections. It causes substantial voter confusion. I've listened to a number of people try to talk about it, but it's really challenging to understand as far as who ultimately wins or how the vote gets counted or how long that would take. I would like to remind you all that the auditor came and spoke on this, and it is a matter of public record that it will increase the cost of our election system, and it will take longer to count. And we currently don't have a system to even count ballots like this. So the fact that we're considering it when we don't have systems in place to do it seems like we have other things to be focused on right now. There's also the potential for significant administrative errors. And it does subvert the will of the people by causing candidates who do not receive the most votes to win an election. So I think the potential for that is pretty dangerous. Thank you all for your time on this important topic.
Thank you, Misty.
Madam Chair, those are all the sign up speakers. You have 4 minutes left until 6:30.
Well, since we are going to allow time for public comment later on, how about we move to the next section, which is an overview of preferential voting. Commissioner Collins.
Yeah, thank you. And is it possible to show the slide that I emailed you?
Hold on. Send it today.
Yeah.
Let me look for it. Go ahead and start. Sorry.
Okay. There's a lot of things that I have felt kind of strange about serving on this elected body. I mean, being one of 15 people that are elected to join a body all at once, where there's not anybody already in office, and you're there's no kind of rules or processes. That's been strange. Of a 1-year term every 10 years, and it's really just 7 months. That's been a little strange. But the thing that has really struck me from the first time we met is that it's crazy to me that when we walked into the county courthouse in that first meeting, that I knew who the 7 Republicans were on this nonpartisan council, and you knew who the 8 Democrats were. That's right. And it strikes me as crazy that the only 2 parties that we have at the national level, and our real parties and our presidential politics and our congressional politics, at the state legislature, all the way down to our little rinky-dink local elected office, that it would really just fall in that binary. And I think it all has to do with money in politics and how we vote, and those are very much aligned. I think, and I'm hoping I'll be able to show you. I just wanted to, before we heard from some great experts tonight, some people that have administered ranked choice voting elections and have tabulated the votes, some people that have run under ranked choice elections, and a Republican state party chair that has used it. I feel like we lose. Oh yeah. Oh, thanks, Chris. When we're stuck in this binary, this us or them, this Republican or Democratic thing, we tend to kind of, I think, hear a term and then just assume a position on it. And to be clear, I do this too. But I feel like ranked choice voting is one of those, and I wanted to in a minute just show like what it actually means. As I think if you don't stop and think about how it's tabulated, it sounds strange. We have people thinking that it means we're counting votes multiple times, or you get more than one vote. So I wanted to just show an example, but it's really just boring good government stuff. There's nothing sinister about it. It's just a way of filling out your ballot so that your vote is more likely to count. It's the same on your first choice, and then you're adding more information, which makes it more likely that a candidate you like, maybe not your favorite candidate, but one that you feel does represent you, will make it into office. It's in Robert rules for the right. It's preferential voting. It's you can find it in section 4562 to 4567. If you're curious to decide about it, it's old. It's about a century old. It's been used lots of places, and we'll hear from some of them tonight. I think we got an email today that I noted because it really reinforced for me that like we're living in this two-party echo chamber. I was reading through this email about complexity and voter confusion and potential for non-majority winners and impact on minority representation. And as a teacher, I said, "Oh, this was written by ChatGPT." And it was. I was curious. I submitted to one of the the AI language model detectors. They can tell when it's when there's bullet points, when it's these kind of really rounded, concise statements. That's usually a pretty good indicator.
English is way too good.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's exactly right. It's very polished, but it's not like a very an especially academic level of vocabulary. It's when you've seen another, you start to spot it. But it reinforced me like, oh man, I think like I could see myself doing the same thing. I hear about something of Republicans proposing, and I think, well, this has got to be bad. I wonder why. Well, why is it bad? And I'll just go type into ChatGPT like, hey, why should I oppose ranked choice voting? And it'll spit these same ones out, and we just like hear these echoes of misinformation, and it's just kind of reinforcing our biases to us. It says, it's a complex for voters to understand. My 4-year-old could tell you the exact ranking of the dinners he eats, the dinners he won't eat. He would definitely tell you he prefers mom to dad, even though I try really hard. I cannot break through to that one voter. They talk about this idea of ballot exhaustion is really a red herring. It's the idea that if you don't rank every candidate, let's say if there's 5 candidates and you just rank one of them, after the first round your ballot is exhausted, it just means that you don't. If you didn't indicate a second choice and your first choice candidate was eliminated, you're done. But that's how it works now. It's exactly the same. You can rank only one. If you are skeptical of this, then you just indicate your first choice candidate. Nothing else changes. If you do have an opinion, say, you know what, I like this person, or this is my favorite candidate, but I really think this person has the best chance of winning. This is what ranked choice voting allows you to do. It keeps us from being held hostage by these only 2 choices. I so often vote for candidates that I do not like and do not trust, because the people that are talking about the really authentic issues that I'd rather give them a chance, I mean, I'd have to be an idiot to vote for them, right? My vote's not going to count. You vote for the Democrat or the Republican, or you're throwing your vote away. And this offers a path out of that. This idea of a potential for non-majority winners. No. Under ranked choice voting, you win when you have over 50%. The same as in our general election now. In a primary right now, we have people that advance in our top 2 primary who only have 30% of the vote. That is minority rule. In ranked choice voting, you're not getting into office until a majority of voters have backed you. Tonight we're going to hear from some experts, and I hope that I hope we ask a lot of questions. I hope if there's something you're wondering about, if there's something about this that you think seems like a lefty scam, I hope you'll ask them. And I hope we'll ask them for their contact information. You can call them later and ask, not in front of us. I just real quick, I'll just take a minute. I just wanted to show so that when we're hearing about different ranked choice voting models and we're talking about tabulating votes, I just want us to have some sense of how very simple it is. And it doesn't take longer, by the way. It's a click of a button. It just adds them up. This was because I'm nothing if not a hypocrite. Those are Chat GPT generated cartoon characters. I started thinking about, if we weren't stuck in this Democrat or Republican, like what are some of the actual constituencies? So I have like the kind of trade union of a candidate. That's a candidate that I think Democrats would sometimes say like, oh no, we have the labor vote, but a working class voter, somebody who's probably pretty worried about taxes, maybe somebody works at one of the refineries and they're awfully skeptical of lefty regulation. Well, so that's somebody that doesn't quite fit on that left-right binary. I put a farmer populist candidate up on there. There's a lot of crunchy granola liberals who like their permaculture and like their raw milk. I think that there's overlap there. Kind of classic a public safety candidate, sort of the tech independent, family values, a kind of a Christian conservative candidate, a candidate who's just focused on fiscal responsibility, a balanced budget, an environmentalist candidate, a kind of a pro-housing, a deregulatory candidate. I didn't put a ton of thought into who I thought would win this. I just tried to think about as a candidate was eliminated, where would their votes go? Kristen, would you click the next one? Okay, so I just for simplicity of use, I just had 100 votes for every round there. So first round, you can see the tech independent candidate only got 6 votes. So they're the lowest vote getter, and nobody here has over 50 votes, right?
Is that Elon?
Yes. He probably would have just bought a candidate. I don't think he'd run himself. So yeah, nobody's over 50%, so nobody wins. The lowest candidate now is eliminated, but anybody, those 6 voters who put tech independent first, their vote now still counts for whoever they put second. Will you click the next slide, Kirsten? Okay, so those 6 votes, let's see who went up there. They gave 2 of those voters ranked the kind of pro housing sustainable growth candidate. They put 2 votes there. 1 vote went to the climate candidate. 3 votes went to the responsible budget candidate. And so now our lowest vote getter is our public safety focused candidate there. Still no candidate has a majority. Nobody has 50 votes. So the public safety candidate is eliminated. And then, so those 12 votes now, whoever those 12 voters ranked as their third choice now, like instead in normal plurality voting, the way we vote now, I mean, those ballots would have already been done, but they're still alive. Those people still, if they want to, if they rank somebody of third, they still get to express their choice there. So those 12 votes, 1 went to the trade union candidate, 6 went to the family values candidate, 4 went to the responsible budget candidate, and 1 went to the sustainable growth candidate. So now our lowest vote getter in that round is the environmentalist candidate, the climate candidate there with 13 votes. So they're eliminated. And then those 13 votes, they go to, oh yeah. Yeah, yes, no, I'm sorry. So we gave 4 votes to the farmer populist, 10 votes to the sustainable growth. You figure that's a kind of environmentalist voters. They probably are gonna preference kind of candidates more on the left as they go down. So they gave most of their votes to sustainable growth. Then so our lowest vote getter now, and the eagle-eyed among you will notice that I made a mistake there. Family values candidate somehow went down 1 vote, but that's because I was just putting in whatever numbers I wanted in Microsoft PowerPoint. This was not actually tabulated. But let's we can ask the county clerk about how they count these. So now our trade union candidate is in last place. Still nobody has over 50 votes. So those votes are redistributed. They, trade union candidate, gave one to the farmer populist, 5 of them went to the family values candidate, 6 of them went to the responsible budget. 5 of them went to sustainable growth. That's probably the voters who were prioritizing their kind of the trade union representation. Yeah, they could kind of straddle the line there. So those votes were pretty mixed. Farmer populist then is eliminated in that round.
And to think that I thought maybe of giving this a yes vote. It just went away.
I would, if I was really trying to make that, I would have named it Farmer Joe. Yeah, Farmer populist is eliminated. Those 22 votes went to 7 of those went to the responsible budget. 10 of those went to family values. 5 of them went for that urban lefty pushing sustainable growth. So now still no one over 50%. There's 3 candidates left. Responsible budget candidate is in last place with 31 votes. So they are eliminated now. And if somebody went all the way down their ballot and they ranked every candidate, their ballot is still alive. They still get to express a preference there among these 3 in this sort of instant runoff process. So those 31 votes are distributed. And most of those, I mean, the kind of budget hawk candidate, the kind of anti-tax candidate, no surprise, more of those would end up going to the family values, more socially conservative than probably responsible budget. But they got over 50%, so now they win. One of the candidates has a majority, and they won.
Can I just,
Yeah.
don't mind if so I just want to clarify for folks that in this scenario, we're electing one candidate. We are not electing multiple, just so folks are clear.
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Morales later on is gonna talk about a multi-member proportional system where you really like using a single vote or ranked choice of voting model or preferential voting model, like it keeps your ballot alive for longer, and you don't have to choose between the candidate you think is going to win and the candidate you like. So I think there's still an advantage there, but boy, in terms of like representing different distinct constituencies and true priorities, I think, yeah, the multi-member districts is really a sweet spot in democracy. I look forward to hearing.
One quick question, if I may. It looks to me like Farmer Joe had the lead in the first round.
Yeah, Farmer Joe had 17 votes, but not a majority.
I understand that, but nonetheless, you know, the popularity of Farmer Joe is still considerable, and now he's out after the 5th round.
I mean, they had 1 more vote than the trade union candidate, 3 more than the family values candidate. This is how, before we advance people to the primaries right now, you can have 17% of the vote. Farmer Joe had 17% of the vote in that first round. And yeah, they would have gone in our top 2 primary, they would have gone to the general. We would have made it, right? So that's all I wanted to say.
So is this a general election?
Yeah, well, and on ranked choice voting,
So
one
you're
of the
assuming that-
advantages.
So there's no primary?
Yeah.
You're welcome, Joe.
Yeah, and under as a charter county in Washington State, we can ask our in-house legal counsel about this, but we are allowed to, for nonpartisan races, skip the primary. So we could just have 1 ballot, rank all of these choices.
I was just listening to the comment from someone about how the farmer had the most votes, but I'm just noticing, looking at it, they had a minority of the votes. And so you're not really getting to represent the majority of what people want until you get to the end. It's like a minority rules in the first one.
Okay, I saw Commissioner Morales, Commissioner Ellenboss, and then Commissioner.
Yeah,
Busher.
just
Go
to
ahead.
clarify, one thing that you said, Commissioner Kelly, am I too quiet? To clarify, so this could be a general or a primary. Technically, you know, it would depend on how your jurisdiction set that up. So can everybody hear me back there? Okay. So basically, if this was a primary and you wanted to get like a top 4, you could do that, right? The way we do that in Washington State via general laws is that we end up with a top 2. But because we're a home rule county, we actually can do what we want and we could create a different kind of number for our primary, or we could create no primary. So we have options.
Commissioner Allenboss.
Yes, Kevin, I really appreciate your putting that together. It graphically points out something that I've feared but haven't been able to put my finger on. And that is this particular process where we're electing an official to service in government. We have several of those categories. They would possess the necessary credentials to perform in government. But, and I realize this was just your assigning of numbers that made this turn out this way. But family values, while it's a very important situation for everyone, a person that has good family values or supports family values does not do anything towards rendering a decision for someone that's qualified to work in government. That's probably the least, it's most important in the families, but it's probably the least important factor as it relates to the caliber and qualifications of the candidate to serve in whatever the governmental office is. And I may have some comments on that later. I'm really happy that we're going to hear from these folks. I am disappointed that they're not here. When Emmett talked about being able to hear from them, I thought, well, that's where all our budget money for the charter review went, to bring those people in, since it doesn't seem to be being spent on housing for them or places to meet for the most part. Thank you very much for doing that, though. It's very helpful.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Well done. I can see why you're a school teacher. Probably a very, very good one. I had a question about the math. Is it possible that if this is run in the real world and a significant segment size of the population just chooses to vote for one person, or they don't go down ballot, they don't rank very many, maybe just a couple, is it possible to do an election and not get one person not get 50%?
No.
Because
No,
because doesn't your model assume that everybody has rank all, well, however many? All?
Yeah, you're right. I did put in that, so everybody here ranked.
Because the ballot fatigue, people might
all of the candidates.
do a couple instead of 6. They might stop at 2. I don't know. Those people are not going to vote. And isn't it possible?
But that's no different than how we vote now. Right now, your ballot is exhausted after the first one.
But
So
is
if
it
you only,
required- are you required to have 50% to prevail in this system? Because I could, the math sounds to me like you can't, there are scenarios where a single person might not get the 50%.
will you ask one of our, actually, like, I want to hear somebody who actually has some credentials to talk about this, and answer that. Like when we're hearing from the clerk, or the elections commission.
Yeah, let's make a note of
I
that
will say,
question.
yeah, it's a great question, and I've passed my gavel because we do need to move on, but I just wanted to say that in order to win an election now or in ranked choice voting, you need 50% of the ballots cast. And so sometimes we have 30% voter turnout. So really, a person can win with 16% of the voters. And so you might never get to 50% of the voters. I hope we do. We should be at 100% of voters, but people don't have to vote in order for there to be a winner because it's based on the votes cast. And so while this is a really nice, like, thank you for this model, we don't have 100% of people voting ever in my lifetime. And like I said, I hope we get there. I hope that we come up with a voting model that makes people more excited to vote, but it's always the portion of people who voted, whoever gets 50% or more of that number. And so it's never nice and round like this. Maybe someday it could be, but even if only 32 people voted, the person who ultimately ended up with 17 votes would be the winner. So, and that'll come out no matter what, because if you voted, your vote counts. Either you voted one time or you voted for all 6 and down your ballot. At some point, one person will get 17. That's just how voting works. But maybe somebody who we've invited to speak will also want to speak on that. And so I think we'll move to Tom Stolman, if you're here, from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I want to welcome you.
Want to read his intro?
Oh, sure, I could. Tom, I'm going to intro you. Give me a sec. Got a lot of papers going here. Give you a second. Okay, Tom Stolman was born and raised in the other Washington, DC. Attended college at MIT, architecture and chemical engineering. First voted for president in 1972 as an 18-year-old and is one of 4 election commissioners in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Board of Election Commissioners is responsible for running local, state, and federal elections in the city. Mr. Stolman is one of the 2 Democrats on the board. In 1941, Cambridge adopted a new charter which incorporated proportional representation as the way to elect the city council and the school committee. Mr. Stolman has participated in over 15 proportional representation elections in Cambridge as a voter, candidate, and observer. He has come to believe that proportional representation is the fairest and most democratic way of electing those who represent us. Welcome, Mr. Stolman.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Let me tell you a little story. I know in my blurb there, I talked about the reason why anybody would adopt this system. And it really is the fairest way, most accurate way to put on a council the intents in the minds of the voters. And that's why Cambridge adopted it in the late 30s. By the way, along with 22 other municipalities across the United States. And in that first election, they confronted something that I've heard some of the commenters talk about. They confronted a new way of voting. They confronted the confusion involved in that. And they did pretty well. There were actually over 80 candidates for city council in the 1941 election, the first one. And 35,000 paper ballots with people's choices ranked on the ballots were submitted. And in the old days, before we had software to count it, which is actually more accurate than people counting it, but that's another story. They would take these 35,000 ballots from all over the city, and this is what you would have seen at one of the local school auditoriums. They brought all these ballots to that place. They fundamentally got them all out of the boxes, onto the floor, and started in the first round counting people's first choices. And just like, it's very similar to the example that was used just now. They went through, I have it here, an astounding number of rounds before they came to the conclusion. But imagine this, anybody who's interested, the public is welcome to watch it all, is showing up at this high school auditorium. And it was a real social scene back then. It no longer, there's some people who show up at the senior center now, but it's the computer that's doing the tabulating. But back then, this was a real social scene. Everybody was coming out, neighbors were coming out, people were blabbing, and they were counting these votes. It was actually, it was an amazing sight to see. And they got through it. And they elected 9 counselors. And they elected 9 counselors in proportion with the voters' intent, not necessarily Democrats or Republicans or Farmer Joe populists, but that 9-member council truly represented what the voters wanted. And voters are complex. They don't, you are correct. They do not just vote party. They vote for other reasons. They may vote because the person's from Bellingham. They may vote because the person's not from Bellingham. The voters are complex, and PR, actually, the genius of it is that it collects all that information. There's more information than just one preference. When you put down 3 preferences, 5 preferences, if you can count to 3, you can do PR. But if you put down a number of preferences, you're informing the vote in a much better way than just the one preference system that we have now. So I'm really excited that you're considering it. Now, unfortunately, I think there's only 3 municipalities right now, maybe a little bit more, that are using it, but it's becoming more popular again. And it's becoming more popular, believe it or not, because of partisanship. PR protects the minority. It doesn't disadvantage the minority, it protects them. And I'll be partisan here. I'm a Democratic commissioner, but if your registered voters in Whatcom County are, say, 40% Republican, 50% Democrat, and 10% unenrolled, it's probably much more unenrolled than that. That council, if you have a 10-member council or a 9-member council, it's going to have, and the voters are voting just by party, it's going to have the numbers that represent that. In other words, the Republicans are still going to be represented. The Democrats are going to be represented, and those unenrolled people are going to be represented too, which just can't happen now. Third parties are at a big disadvantage in our traditional system. PR allows third-party candidates, unenrolled candidates, independent candidates to have a chance. So that's the story of Cambridge. We're still doing it, and our charter commission just recently discussed all of the same things that you're discussing tonight, believe it or not. Should we abandon PR for something better? And the conclusion was, no, we shouldn't, because PR is the best way of doing it. Any questions? Oh, by the way, I want to thank Whatcom County for the raspberries that you send us. In New England, we have a drink called the Raspberry Lime Ricky. You can send me an email. If you have my email, I can send you the recipe. It wouldn't be the same without the raspberries. Thank you very much.
We are famous for our raspberries. I think we'll go through the 4 presentations and then open up to questions and discussion. Is that okay? Good. And I wanted to just say, for clarity, for folks who haven't been studying this a long time, PR stands for proportional representation. So it's really important to understand the terms and the acronyms and all those things as we're going through. Mr. Solman, if you have time to hang on for a little bit.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. I'm going to introduce Josh Daniels. Josh Daniels.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
Josh is somehow on, but not on. So please go to the next person.
Okay.
We'll get him back. We'll get him by the time we're done.
That sounds good. Okay, good. Well, let's see. And I know, just looking for other, if there's other time constraints for presenters. If not, I'll just go to the next on the list, which is Stan Lockhart. Stan has spent his life in technology and public service with a strong desire to make the world a better place. He runs his own lobbying, sales support, and consulting practice, helping clients and governments solve problems. Stan has served as the Utah State Republican Party Chair, the Utah County Republican Party Chair, and he has received the Ronald Reagan Award for his extensive service in the Republican Party. Stan still serves on his local party central committee and the Constitution and Bylaws Committee. He's been a member of the Provo City Council and Utah State Board of Education. He was just appointed to ALEC's Federalism Task Force. An Eagle Scout himself, Stan remains significantly involved with Boy Scouts of America and the Utah Alliance of Boys and Girls Club. He has 7 children in a blended family and 13 grandchildren. I want to welcome Mr. Lockhart.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to speak today. I think the best way for me to share my journey on ranked choice voting is just to tell you the story. Back in the late 90s, I was on our state central committee for the Republican Party, and conservative grassroots activists brought ranked choice voting to our party. And I've got to tell you, my initial reaction was, are you out of your ever-loving minds? Much like some of the people tonight that are, that came and testified in your public comments. As tends to happen in parties, the grassroots activists get their way eventually, and we began using ranked choice voting in our party conventions. What immediately got my attention is that those conventions went from 10 to 12 hours down to 3 or 4 hours. And so immediately I'm like, wow, if you get pretty much the same outcomes, why not do it this way? And there's a lot of evidence that you do get similar outcomes from ranked choice voting and plurality voting. So then it was just kind of this journey off and on over a period of many, many years. We kept using it in the party. Most recently, our state party used it in the 2020 state convention. But it wasn't until I really dived into it and I did a deep dive into all of the arguments in favor and against. And the conclusion I came to is that ranked choice voting is better than plurality voting. Now, the reason for that is it really hinges upon something that a professor named Kenneth Arrow got a Nobel Prize for, something called his impossibility theorem. And in that theorem, he essentially says it's full of a lot of mathematical equations. But essentially what he says is there's no perfect system of elections. There's only relative strengths and weaknesses. So when you hear someone give a blank statement about ranked choice voting is this or plurality voting is that, it's almost always tinged with which is better. And what are your goals in an election? What do you want to happen in an election? And we all know that our country was founded on this principle of a representative republic, where we elect individuals to represent us. And the point in time that our citizens have the greatest influence on government is at the polls in an election. And so it becomes a really, what you're discussing is fascinating, because you're really at the heart of what makes America America. But for me, I started looking at what are the goals that I have for a great election. And my most important goal is to allow a voter the freedom to vote for whoever they think would represent them the best, without fear that their vote could help get someone else elected, or I've got to vote for someone that I don't like as much in order for someone that I kind of like to get elected. And truly, under plurality voting, those are the calculus that have to be made. It's called strategic voting. And all the time, voters have to decide how to vote in order to get outcomes that might not be ideal, but might be the only way that they can get some voice in government. So, so again, as we start looking at this, I wanted voters to be able to vote freely for whoever they thought would be best. And that does give some power to people that affiliate with minor parties, because they can vote for their preferred candidate first, and then they can vote for someone that they like a little bit less second, and that person they like second might be the person that gets elected. And this idea that you have to vote for everyone, this exhausted ballot issue is a bit of a red herring, because you could require everybody to vote for every, you've got to rank every candidate on the ballot. That would pretty much guarantee that you didn't have any exhausted ballots. But because we want people to be able to freely express their will, allowing them to not vote for anybody is a better way to allow them to freely express their will. And so there really are very few games with ranked choice voting for the voter. Now, for the candidate, there's a different, there's all sorts of games that get played. But what we found with ranked choice voting in Utah, so we went from the party using it to using it in public elections in a pilot beginning in 2019. And what we've discovered in our public elections is that there is less contention. It's not that there's no contention. It's just there's an incentive on the part of candidates that instead of tearing down their opponents, they need to talk about issues. They need to talk about things that people care about. They need to talk about not only what their issues are, but what their opponents' issues are. Because if I can't be first on your ballot, I want to be second on your ballot. And instead of focusing on their base and only talking to their base, they're pretty much forced to talk to everyone. Because if you can't be first on someone's ballot, you certainly want to go after their trying to be the second choice on their ballot. And so it provides for generally better elections than we've seen with our plurality elections. There are little challenges with ranked choice voting, but by and large, I found through a lot of extensive polling here in Utah, and also in polling around the country, voters understand how to rank candidates. I mean, they rank choices in their lives every day. Where are we going to eat tonight? Everybody in the family has an idea, and somebody makes the choice. Normally, it's mom or dad. We make choices on what kind of ice cream we like best. We make choice on what public parks we prefer to play in. We make choices all the time in our lives. This is not something unusual for voters. And the polling shows just that. They understand how to rank candidates very, very well. They find most of the time they find it very easy to use. So a lot of these talking points against ranked choice voting will have a thread of truth, but aren't truthful in its totality. What else would I tell you? Oh, one of the reasons I'm so glad to be here tonight is that I'm from Washington. I grew up in Klickitat County and graduated from Lyle High School. I was student body president in 1980 in my class of 24 kids. And my only goal in going off to college in Utah was to come home to Lyle. And I only get back once every 10 years for my class reunion. I will tell you that we had about a 40% attendance at my class reunion last time. All of 10 of my classmates and I were there. So it's a real privilege to talk to people in my own state. But I can tell you that ranked choice voting is not to be feared. Now, today in the Republican Party, it is feared. And it's feared for the primarily because Sarah Palin lost in Alaska in 2020 and a Democrat snuck in under ranked choice voting. In the deep dives to deconstruct that race, what was actually found is if they had used plurality voting, she still would have lost. But ranked choice voting was the easy, a whipping boy, and so it's been whipped up within the Republican Party to oppose it. But there has not been a deep dive. There are many instances in the Republican Party where ranked choice voting helps candidates, primarily in big congressional or Senate primaries around the country, where many times you'll have multiple Republican candidates running. You'll have Democrats find the Republican candidate least likely to be electable in the general election. They'll actually give them money. The Republican will win with a plurality of the vote of like 35%. They'll go to the general election and get absolutely slaughtered. It happens over and over again within our party, and ranked choice voting would solve that problem. But I would just encourage you tonight to look at what your goals are in an election. You can count ranked choice voting as quickly as plurality voting anymore with the election systems that are out there that can produce outcomes as quickly as one or the other. I've spent a long time looking deeply at ranked choice voting, and and again, I would just tell you that if I look at all the pros and cons and I compare them to the pros and cons of plurality voting, I take ranked choice voting just about every time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockhart. How are we doing on Josh Daniels? Are we moving on?
We have Josh.
We have Josh, okay. One sec, I'm gonna introduce Josh. Josh Daniels is an elections and democracy expert. He served as Utah County Clerk from 2021 to 2023, following a term as Deputy Clerk. Government Technology Magazine named Daniels among its top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers in 2020 for his work increasing election security and piloting mobile voting for overseas, elderly, and disabled voters. From 2001 to 2010, Josh served in the Marine Corps with deployments in Iraq and Morocco. In the Marines, he rose to the rank of sergeant and received the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal for his performance. Josh currently works as the CEO of InnoGov, a software company that seeks to modernize government services, including election administration. Josh and his wife have 4 children. Welcome, Mr. Daniels.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you all. I love the state of Washington. In one of my previous public policy roles, I got to travel to Washington State a number of times. And for a long time, we printed our ballots in your state. So as you know, Utah followed the lead of Washington State in expanding vote by mail. And under my tenure, when I started working in elections in 2019, we really doubled down and expanded that service. And as you mentioned, voter turnout earlier in the meeting, we saw our voter turnout increase significantly thanks to making it more convenient for people to participate. Your election clerks in Washington will remember the 2020 election when, turnout was probably north of 85%. It was for us in Utah. And a lot of that was, of course, engagement, but we made it very convenient for people to participate, as you have done in Washington. So many kudos to you for that. So for me, I've worked in a number of public policy roles. I've worked as a member of staff for Congress. I've worked as the policy director for a think tank. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm actually a bit of a mentee of Stan Lockhart, where I served in Republican Party leadership in Utah in a variety of roles over the last 25 years. But in 2019, I was new to election administration. And, with my legal experience, I'm an attorney by trade. I was brought in as the deputy to ensure that the second largest county in Utah, Utah County, which is the big Republican county, had good, solid, secure elections. And some of the innovations that we actually did were in partnership with the founders of Clear Ballot. And we did a lot of innovative things in Utah County to make the voter experience more secure and more accessible for everybody. But one of the things that we also did was we were the first county to implement ranked choice voting elections for our local cities who could opt to use that type of election. Well, for me, I was not new to ranked choice voting. Thanks to leaders like Stan Lockhart in the Utah Republican Party, I was familiar with using ranked choice voting in our Republican convention process, where we nominated Republican candidates using ranked choice voting. And personally, I'd actually tabulated and even hand counted ranked choice voting ballots previously. So it was pretty interesting to actually implement ranked choice voting officially in our our actual government run elections beyond just the party process. And one of the things that we learned was that it didn't require any additional costs. There was a question about cost. Our existing election systems, and in fact, most of the major vendors, including Clear Ballot across the country, have ranked choice voting functionality built into those systems. So enabling that option was not operationally difficult for us. We undertook some voter education, which I think is important, but part of that was we wanted to gauge what might be a pain point for voters. And so we actually went out in the community to different demographic groups, and we tested ranked choice balloting and got feedback. One experience I'll never forget, we went to an assisted living facility where some of our most, what we might call, experienced voters were residing. And we handed out ranked choice ballots to them, and we gave them zero explanation about ranked choice voting. We simply told them that we were doing some new paper ballots and that we had some new vote by mail procedures, and we just wanted to do a sample vote. And then we handed them a ranked choice ballot. And then we wandered around the audience to hear the discussions and see what was happening as voters were interacting with the ranked choice ballot. And what I heard didn't surprise me, but it does run counter to a common criticism of ranked choice voting, which is that it's confusing. Well, what I found was that it was not very confusing. A lot of people were talking, well, who should I vote for? Well, you can vote for everybody. It's just you have to pick which choice you want. Oh, yeah, well, I like this more than I like that. And this is something that we all do in our life. We pick something that we like more over something that we like less. If the something that we like more is not available, well, then we pick the thing that we like maybe a little bit less. It's a lot like me at the grocery store yesterday when I really wanted vanilla ice cream, carb-free vanilla ice cream, which is a little bit more rare, and they didn't have it. And they had chocolate peanut butter instead. And for me, that was a sufficient compromise. But what we found was we used the same systems to do ranked choice voting. The ballot was slightly different because voters could choose a first, a second, a third, a fourth. But the other thing that we did was that we actually logged every phone call during the election period from voters to see what issue they were calling about. We wanted to test whether ranked choice voting by itself was an issue for voters. And what we found was that less than 5% of phone calls to the office during the election period were specifically about ranked choice voting. We didn't quite get deeper as to whether they were confused about it. We were just looking broadly at, do voters, need additional assistance because the ballot is ranked order? And largely the case was no. Most calls were like all other calls about registration and deadlines and things like that. We also did some post-election surveying. We found that over 80% of voters that had participated liked ranked choice voting, wanted to continue using ranked choice voting, and that over 85% of voters found the ballot easy to use and reported that nothing about the ranked choice election was confusing to them. So we did the same process as we would with any ballot. Nothing was significantly different with regard to most of our election processes. Ballots went out by mail, they came back by mail. We processed them the way all the other ballots were processed. We counted and tabulated them on the same systems. We used the same auditing procedures. We used all the same security protocols. There was really nothing different except at the very end, when you report the results are slightly different. So there's an additional step when you report the results, because you're not reporting just a result of, well, this person got 20% and that person got 30%. You need to do, like the example you saw earlier, well, who's the lowest vote getter? Okay, that person has been eliminated. There's a redistribution of the tallying of votes. And so the reporting of the winner was slightly different, but we were able to use a sort of certified, approved tool that automates that process so that it's not complicated or time consuming. We were able to report results alongside all the other types of election results that we reported. There was nothing about our reporting timing or our counting timing that was delayed because of ranked choice voting. I have heard that some jurisdictions will delay the reporting of their final results for reasons that are really unique to those places, that are based on decisions that are unique to those places. There's really nothing that we found fundamental about ranked choice voting that delayed the counting or the result reporting or the ability to report preliminary results on election night. We did all of those things like we would any other election. The transparency features that we would normally have in elections were the same with ranked choice voting. Well, so really our big takeaway was that ranked choice voting was beneficial to our local cities because it actually saved them some time and money. As it was discussed earlier, maybe in some elections, you might winnow the field of candidates through what you might think of as a primary, and then certain candidates move on to a second round of elections. You might call it a general. Some jurisdictions might call it a runoff. In the case of our city elections, which are nonpartisan, they would have a primary and a general, and they would have to pay for that. And they would contract with our county clerk elections office to do that service. And so in those cases, the cities saved half the cost of the election. Candidates saved some time. They didn't have to spend as much time and money during the primary election cycle because they would only have one election cycle in the general, which goes to a point Stan made earlier, which he alluded to, which is that most of the voters generally participate in the general election. Less voters participate in the primary. And so with ranked choice voting specifically in our case, where cities would use ranked choice voting to eliminate the need for an earlier primary election, they actually made sure that all the candidates interested in running were still being voted on by the group of people, the general election voters, who were most likely to vote during that period of time. And so in a lot of ways, there was more engagement for voters because the larger group of voters were making the determining decision about who would ultimately win the race. And oftentimes you just see much lower turnout in these earlier elections. This is one of the reasons ranked choice voting is being looked at by states that have runoffs, where they notice a drop-off in a runoff election, because sometimes a runoff might be after a November general election, less voters show up to participate. And so in those cases where they have statutory rules that winners must receive 50% plus one to win, this runoff election can do a disservice to the will of the voters because fewer voters participate in those follow-up runoff elections. So just all in all, our experience was that ranked choice voting wasn't a boogeyman. It didn't create any problems or headaches from an election administration perspective. And in some cases, it changed the dynamics of the races. We did hear reported from different candidates that they felt like the race was more civil because there was less of an incentive to polarize voters about different candidates. You don't really want to tear down your opponents as much because you realize that with multiple candidates in a race, you might need some of the supporters of opposing candidates to give you a second or third or fourth place vote. And that's useful. And so it incentivized candidates to be, I think, a little more authentic about the policy differences that might divide them as candidates, but to focus less on maybe personal differences or tactics that could be seen as toxic or polarizing. And it really creates a more collegial feel to the election, which frankly reflects the policy process, I think, more authentically. I rarely see councils and commissions who act as toxic in their sort of governing as you might see in a campaign cycle. I mean, at the end of the day, it's always funny to hear stories of Congress getting along just fine, bipartisan, to pass a lot of different core legislation for government. And you sort of think, well, wait, I thought these two people hated each other. It's like, well, sometimes it's kind of a show. It's just kind of part of the strategy in elections themselves. And so I think our city council candidates in these nonpartisan races really appreciated the elimination of that, what would otherwise be a natural incentive to be a little more competitive and combative in the election dialogue. And so there was a lot of benefits that we experienced in Utah. Some of the other things that I did with ranked choice voting, given my, I was partisan elected, so I was a Republican county clerk, because as you know, Democrats and Republicans count ballots very differently, right? 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 3. So that's a joke, right? In other words, counting ballots is not a partisan activity, but I was a partisan elected official. And as a Republican election clerk, I actually functioned as a service as the election chair of the Republican Party, and we used ranked choice voting in our 2020 convention, where it was like an at-home convention. Folks were voting from home during the pandemic, and rather than having multiple rounds of voting that would take all day, as Stan mentioned, they were able to cast one single ballot, and through the instant runoff process that ranked choice voting facilitates, we were able to select winners in a much more efficient manner. And so I've been able to run ranked choice elections both in these Republican nominating conventions as well as in official elections. And I think it really was a service to those that participated. And I've got lots of technical information and background. If there are detailed questions, I'd love to answer them. But I think that starts as a good overview.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. And just as the others, if you have time to hang in there, we've got one more presenter and then we'll open it up for questions. I'd love to welcome Jason Gren. Jason was born and raised in Alaska, where he was a life
chair, sorry.
Jason?
Jason was here and he's no longer here, and I somehow he and Josh
He's
are.
here.
I'm right here.
Oh, perfect.
Right,
Just making my way.
Can I still read your thing, or is that weird? Is it okay to still introduce you?
Sure, please.
It's a fun trick.
I'll stand here and smile.
Jason Gren was born and raised in Alaska, where he was a lifelong registered Republican. In 2016, he won election to the state legislature, running and serving as an independent. Jason and his family recently moved to Washington State, Whatcom, where he works as a communications director for the city of Duval and currently is communications advisor for the city of Bellevue. Jason serves on the board of Fair Vote Washington Foundation. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. As mentioned, I was born and raised in Alaska, but because I'm your neighbor to the north, I also grew up a lifelong Mariner fan. So I'm very happy to be here in Washington and able to catch games with my kids. It's probably.
Something.
I want to want you at the mic so others can
You
hear.
can just turn it off.
I can.
We can object.
Because
If he's not wearing it, can we try turning this off? Joe, do you know how to turn that off? I think it's somehow interfering with two of them. I'm not sure.
I've been on before, so I don't know.
Let's try it now. We got a whole lot of noise there. Is it okay?
Well, we
Yeah.
have weird noise, y'all.
sounds like there's.
Okay.
Oh, I think something that dial needs a volume dial.
Good.
But
You're
yeah.
good without the mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can speak as loud as needed,
Great.
everyone can hear, that's great.
Perfect.
Well, again, thank you, really appreciate the opportunity to chat through this. You know, as an Alaskan, someone who's lifelong Alaskan, very passionate about what is happening up there, but as someone who is now, as a Washingtonian, really excited to share what I saw as really that front row seat that I had, both serving in the legislature as an independent, was part of a bipartisan majority in the Alaska House. And I really saw the benefits of working together, working with people of different values and different mindset and different priorities. But because of that work, I wanted to share those insights of what happened in Alaska from before the ranked choice voting and open primary system was implemented, and post implementation, what's happening for both electeds, for candidates, and also for voters of Alaska. Really wanted to start with a common myth that ranked choice voting sometimes benefits one party over the other. Alaska, as we know, is typically seen as a red state. That continues to be true under ranked choice voting. In 2022, during the first time ranked choice voting was used in Alaska, Governor Mike Dunleavy, who is a Republican, was reelected in the first round of ranked choice tabulation. The Republicans in Alaska maintained their majorities in both the House and the Senate under ranked choice voting. The R Street Institute, which is a center-right think tank in Washington, D.C., found through all their analysis that ranked choice voting had no negative impact on Republicans' ability to maintain their legislative seats, even though the new system was being used. So in short, the system didn't necessarily change who won in Alaska, but it changed how they won. It rewards those candidates, and it continues to reward candidates who appeal to a broader base of voters, which, as we've talked about, really reflects voters' different priorities and who they are as complex individuals and citizens of our communities. Ranked choice voting in this new system in Alaska, it made the elections more competitive and really more fair. In Alaska's old system, like many places that have closed primaries, those races were decided in a low turnout closed primary. Candidates only had to appeal to their ideological base of their party to advance to the general or perhaps even win. And now in Alaska, with ranked choice voting and the what we have is an open top 4 primary system, more voices are heard. Independents candidates like myself, moderate candidates, they actually have a real shot in general elections. They can be a third party who runs and has a opportunity to win, even though this new system, some people might feel that it does the opposite. So in 2022, the first time that ranked choice voting was used in Alaska, every race in Alaska, which was 62 different elections, had multiple credible candidates across the political spectrum, which really makes those candidates work harder and connect with more voters. You can imagine what happens as a candidate if you can no longer just talk to Democrats or Republicans, if you have to talk to all voters, what that does for your campaigning. I found as an independent running that I could no longer, look for Republicans or just Democrats. I literally had to knock on every door. I had to talk to every voter to see what their values were and how we connected. And as I tell my wife, who does not agree with me all of the time, not all voters agree with their preferred candidate all the time. But you find those real values, those real priorities and your philosophies that make you want to be the preferred candidate. And in ranked choice voting, you can find someone who maybe isn't a major party candidate, and you can vote for them first. You can vote with your head and your heart and still find other ways to connect with different candidates. And so post-election polling in 2022, an independent research firm found that 60% of Alaskans said that elections were more competitive than in years past. And I believe that competition leads to greater accountability of elected officials and better representation as well. We've talked a lot about if ranked choice voting is confusing, if voters understand it. In Alaska, the case was that voters found it to be very, very simple. Polling in 2022 and in 2024 showed that almost 80% of voters found the system to be somewhat or very simple to use. You can imagine that's no small feat in Alaska, where sometimes government reforms and changes are often met with skepticism. And in 2024, there was actually a chance to repeal the system. A statewide repeal effort was made, and that effort was denied. And so I think that shows that voters have experienced ranked choice voting now twice with their statewide races. They see its value, they tend to trust it, they find it easy to use. elections are more competitive, and they decided to keep it moving forward. We also talked, thanks to other speakers, talking about civility and coalition building. And really, I think this is one of the most profound changes that I've seen, how ranked choice voting affects the tone of campaigns. Because candidates need second and third choices to win, you can't just tear down your opponent. You can't just fire up your base. You really need to understand the value of building bridges and talking to all voters. One of my favorite examples is the case of Kathy Giesel, who is now, she's a current state senator and the majority leader in the state Senate. But in 2020, before ranked choice voting was implemented, she was a long-term state senator, very conservative state senator, had been there for about 12 years and was the sitting Senate president at the time. Well, sometimes solutions, you need partners, and she would reach across the aisle to get certain legislation passed. And her opponent in a closed primary, Republican primary, decided that she reached across the aisle too often and she should be punished for that. And she ended up losing her election in 2020 in a closed partisan primary. Ranked choice voting comes along and she sees the value in what she had done in the past, which was reaching across the aisle, building bridges, working with other people. And in 2022, under ranked choice voting, she beat her, the incumbent who had beat her 2 years earlier, because she was rewarded for using her ability to build bridges and to build coalitions. She's been quoted as saying that voters often look, they're often looking for people who are willing to work with everyone, not just one party. I get told again and again that because I'm not locked into a political party's agenda and I'm focused on doing what's right for the state, you should be rewarded for that. But that impact doesn't stop at that the ballot box or at your state capitol or perhaps in your county. RCD does foster bipartisan coalitions. When I was in the legislature, we had special session after special session after special session. We just couldn't get things done because we didn't want to get punished for working across the aisle. We didn't want to be seen as shaking hands with people who weren't in our party. And the 5 of the 6 years leading up to 2022, when ranked choice voting was implemented, Alaska had special sessions every session. And in 2021, they were in session for a record 212 days. Usually a session lasts 90 days, but because they just couldn't be seen working together, they just couldn't get things done. So they had to keep calling themselves into special session and special session, which obviously costs time, money, and breaks voters' trust. They don't trust you to do the job that you're sent to your capital to do. But since adopting ranked choice voting, Alaska has wrapped up its legislative sessions the last 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024, on time. No special sessions, no stalemates, just more governance, less chaos. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think when legislators and our elected officials are accountable to all voters, not just their partisan base, they have more reason to collaborate. They have more reason to get things done on time. And I really believe that when you depolarize the incentives, that you actually depolarize the outcomes as well. And you're rewarding those candidates for reaching across the aisle and just finding solutions as opposed to pointing fingers at each other. When I first ran for office, I heard this a lot, and you might hear this as voters or people who are running for office, is that voters often feel like they have to choose the lesser of two evils. And as been explained through both different speakers and examples, ranked choice voting changes that. You really can vote with your head and your heart, because you can vote for someone who you know isn't going to win. They don't have the money or the backing of a party or have the name recognition that it might take to win. But you can still show your support because you agree on one major issue that really is important to you. But at the same time, if you feel like you need to lend support to someone who has a better chance of winning, more of the head vote, you can do that as well. It leads to, RCV leads to elected officials who better reflect the full spectrum of the voters' needs, the community needs, and all of our opinions. As Stan mentioned, ranked choice voting is not a cure-all. There's pros and negatives to all of our election systems. But I really do think, looking at the Alaska system, looking at ranked choice voting used in different states and municipalities across the nation, that it's the best tool we have for improving how voters elect our candidates and how elections are run through those candidates. Alaska is a urban rural mix. Anchorage is the big city. It's about 50% of the population. It's a little more purple than the rest of the state, but Alaska has a long history of voting for independent state representatives, governors, US senators, and it really can show that a politically diverse state, a state that has rural and urban mixes, it can reduce the polarization and find candidates who can work with both and understand the needs of both of those dynamics. And as I mentioned, I think the real big takeaway for me is that governing responsibly is now a reward for those who run for elections, and voters want to see those candidates who are willing to work and listen to all available options. And as voters, we now get to reward people that we want to see. We want to see solutions for the problems that are facing our community. And I think Alaska shows that ranked choice voting helps do that in the best way. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Ben. So while we still have, and what a treat I will say, thank you so much to the folks who put all this together. It's awesome to have people here who have this experience. And while we still have them here, I know we're in a couple different time zones online. Would love to first open up to the commission for questions, and then if we have time, we'd love to take some questions from the public as well. But I'm wondering if any of the commissioners, Commissioner Morales, and then Susan.
I just, can you hear me? Sorry, this thing is really loud. I have a question for Tom that I wish you had spoken a little bit more about, which is Cambridge has like one big pool of candidates. And if I'm just wondering if you could talk about like the all at large nature of that. And then also, I know you've seen the draft that I've also proposed, which is sort of still districted but multi-candidate. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that kind of a system a little bit more.
That's right. Cambridge elects its city council, 9 members, and school committee, 7 members. All of them, all of the seats, all of the 9 city council seats, all of the 7 school committee seats are up for election. And it happens every 2 years. We've actually been debating in our charter committee whether or not that's a strain on the candidates, you know, having to run that often. But that's how we do it, and that's how we use ranked choice voting, proportional representation voting, is to elect these multiple member bodies all at once. And it's, as I've said, it turns out to be a very effective way of representing what the voters are thinking that particular year when they're electing people.
Mr. Metzler.
I just wanted to repeat the question I posed earlier, and I'm not sure it was understood. The example that Commissioner Collins gave assumed that everybody would fill out their entire ballot. So hypothetical, let's say it's a race for county sheriff, and I could see there being 8 candidates for county sheriff. I doubt if people will rank all 8. So what if people sort of evenly rank maybe 1, 2, or 3? Isn't it possible in that scenario that you don't get 50%?
Yes, it is. And what the commissioner didn't show on his example, it's a good example, but what the commissioner didn't show is that usually after every round, there are a certain number of those votes that are, it's a terrible term, exhausted. And so they're not at that stage, the voters' intent has been thoroughly analyzed and used up, and the voter's intent is no longer possible because the voter didn't put down all 6 candidates. Remember that election, the 1941 election with 80 candidates? I will guarantee you that nobody filled out the ballot with 80 choices. And I just looked it up. At the end of that election, actually, I'll go with the last city council election. This is 2 years ago. There were 25,000 ballots cast. And at the very end, after almost 15 rounds of voting in order to select the 9 members, the total number of so-called exhausted ballots was around 10% of that 24,000. So 2,400 ballots were in the exhausted box. So that means if you're just going with choosing one candidate, yes, the answer to the question is you may end up with a winner who does not receive over 50% of the vote. But it's by far and away better than ending up with a winner who gets 17% of the vote.
Whereas our current top 2 out of the primary system does lead to a 50% winner. In Washington State, you can have 15 people run, but only 2 will go to the general, and somebody's going to get 50%. And I also was wondering, could there be an image of what a ballot looks like? I don't know if I've ever seen a ballot that maybe has like 8.
Oh, you have one. It's under your pen.
Right here.
Yeah.
So you have to put like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of stuff.
Mr. Daniels, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to sort of follow up with what Tom was talking about with the 50% threshold and exhausted ballots and share our experience. Generally, exhausted ballots tended to be under 5%, oftentimes under 2%. And I wanted to point out that this is really common in elections today, where voters might vote for the president, but not vote for the Senate or for the Congress. They might vote for Senate and Congress, but not, county commissioner or state representative. And, in the parlance of political science, we call those undervotes. These are people that generally tried to participate in the election, but didn't participate in all of the races. You'll also have spoiled ballots. You'll have people who vote for 2 candidates. I kid you not, in the 2020 election, I physically inspected and saw multiple ballots where people voted for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I wanted to interview these voters to understand what was going on. But you have people that kind of cast a protest vote, whether that's to not vote for anybody. We got blank ballots sent back to our office, or they vote for everybody. Is similar to an exhausted ballot. And keep in mind that when you say a 50% threshold, you mean 50% of the votes that are counted of those voters who did actually participate. If you do not rank all the candidates, you as a voter are choosing not to participate in voting on candidates that could win, but that are candidates that for whatever reason you're indifferent about them. So you still have a 50% plus 1 winner, but it's 50% of the ballots where voters cast a valid preference among the candidates that are in the running. Also not dissimilar to somebody who writes in a name that is nonsensical or that can't be counted. They're an unfiled write-in or something like that. And so you still have 50% plus 1 winners. I think the point Tom's making is it's not necessarily 50% of all the voters who attempted to participate. Well, of course, it never is. Nor is it 50% of all the people who could vote, because maybe only some people show up and vote, right? So those are important caveats to keep in mind.
If I could, I just wanted to provide some real life context on what was happening in Alaska in terms of ballot exhaustion and accepted ballots. In Alaska, there's a top 4 system, so there's only 4 candidates, up to 4 candidates in each race. In some of the districts, it was all 4 Republicans, and voters had to find a way how to rank those people. In most cases, though, it was about 2 Republicans, a Democrat, and an independent. Most of the state races for House and Senate. On average, the voter ranked 2.5 candidates. So between 2 and 3, they could find someone who they wanted to show support for. And in 2024, at the state level, 99.9% of the ballots were accepted. They were filled out correctly. They could be scanned. They could be used. And so incredibly low error rate. I'm sure Josh, the auditors, people who run elections, 99.9% acceptance rate is incredibly high. It shows a really robust understanding from voters on knowing how to figure out how to fill out the ballot and rate correctly.
Thank you. Commissioner Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank all four of you for being here today, providing your experience and your context. I thought it was very helpful. Over the time I've been on the commission, even before, anticipating that this would be a subject of discussion, I try to do my due diligence and educate myself on ranked choice voting, proportional representation, single transferable vote, whatever we want to call it. We talked about a lot of, and there's a lot of things about ranked choice voting that I like, if that's how it actually shakes out. I guess my question for you, and this is more subjective, with, I believe it was Stan said, you get similar results. I don't anticipate we're going to get dramatically different results here in Whatcom County if we were to go with this, but he said it was a better system. So I'm just curious why Cambridge has been using this since 1941. I don't believe the state of Massachusetts does not use it. I'm just curious why, if this is such a superior system, why so few states and quite frankly, so few jurisdictions around the country use it. So I realize this is more of an opinion question, but just your thoughts would be helpful.
I'd be happy to start, and maybe Tom. So, I've had a lot of political discussions, philosophical discussions about this, and you're right. There's opposition to ranked choice voting. Historically, what I've read in the history of election reform is that some reforms that were meant to be more representative or more fair or more democratic, however you characterize them, over the years, generally speaking, and I'm talking 200 years of US history, political machines are the ones that generally oppose changes to the rules of elections, particularly if the rules don't favor their convenient or maybe typical pathway to victory, if that makes sense. If you're a political machine, and political party could be thought of as a machine, you want to win. You want to advance your policy agenda. That makes sense. But you also like systems that are either predictable for you to win with the strategy that's the simplest for you, or that you can capture. And there's been examples in American history of elections that are captured by political machines. The founders were very outspoken against factionalist parties themselves. Largely speaking, what you see when you see philosophical opposition to ranked choice voting, it's incumbent power structures, political machines, parties, etc. People for whom the current system returns them to power predictably, they are the ones that generally don't like a system that is pitched as more fair, more representative. They don't like that. That doesn't help their cause. So honestly, it really is about, and a lot of these reforms, as you read the story of when reforms have been repealed or changed over the years, it tends to be kind of the political machinery that doesn't like the reform because they prefer a set of rules that maybe they're more likely to win under. Quite famously, in the re-election of President Thomas Jefferson, he wrote a letter to one of the states asking which method of delegate selection they were going to use, because it was very to employ. And so it's kind of funny that one of the chief critics of parties and machines was like, well, I got to win. So what rules are you going to be using when it came to the nominations? And generally speaking, it's those kinds of political incentives that I think drive both support and opposition for electoral rule changes.
What Josh is saying is certainly true for the 22 municipalities that had PR voting in the 30s, including New York City, by the way. Cincinnati, Ohio, were among the top cities that were using it to elect their city councils. And he's absolutely right. The New York machine hated the idea that its favored candidates were not getting elected to the city council anymore because the voters wanted other people. In Cincinnati, elected a Black mayor. And then the next few years, the people opposed to African Americans getting in a position of power got it repealed in Cincinnati. So there's all sorts of interesting reasons why people have abandoned it. As to why, that's a very good question you asked. You know, why hasn't Massachusetts used it? Why isn't it more widespread in Massachusetts? Well, it is growing in Massachusetts at the local level, which is interesting to me. At the state level, you're going to have a problem with the major party, the Democrats, and even the minor major party, the Republicans, are going to fight it tooth and nail because it will, they will perceive it as diluting their power. I hope more municipalities take it up, and it's growing in Massachusetts.
Maybe I could just give you my perspective. I think it's a great question. As we started using ranked choice voting in municipal elections, I did dozens and dozens of presentations to our city councils and mayors. And I found that as long as you were talking about the concept, there was widespread support. And then when I'd come back for the second visit, as they thought about how it would affect them in their own race, there was much less support. And so I think it's just human nature that whatever the principle is, it can sound great, but in the end, that self-interest that the invisible hand causes is what will dominate the day. And that's what I think that's what's hindered it the most. We found that some elected officials would oppose it, but almost always they were being encouraged by political strategists, campaign managers, those people who knew how to win under plurality and just weren't sure under ranked choice.
Thank you. Just to kind of reiterate, if we look at, it was mentioned earlier that up to 13 states now have banned ranked choice voting as an option. All of those states who have banned it, those who have led the charge are the states who are generally the political party that's in charge or runs that state. It's not done through a people's initiative. It's not done through a minority party who wants to pass this legislation. It's done by those who are traditionally in that state in power. In Alaska, when this was done through a people's initiative in Alaska, and during some of the debates, the Republican Party came out and said, if this happens, this will be the end of political parties in Alaska. 63% of Alaskan voters are registered nonpartisan. So 63% of Alaskans probably like, that's okay with me. Parties aren't running the show any longer. That kind of helped understand, okay, this is who's kind of leading the charge. These parties want to keep their power, as mentioned. They know how to win under plurality. Campaign managers, consultants, they know the recipe. They know kind of how to do this. You know, it's done by negative advertising or it's done this way. With ranked choice voting, it changes the math. It changes the complexity of your candidate understanding what it takes to win. And so, and that's why you're seeing, as mentioned, a lot more grassroots efforts. More municipality and cities are kind of doing this as a kind of more bottom up, as opposed the bans are coming from the top down. And so, it again, just kind of repeat, it does seem to come from those bans, or why it's not instituted is generally it's seen as something to be able to maintain and keep candidates you want to win and run, and some of that power structure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I make one more comment?
Sure, and then I do see. Go ahead.
There's another reason why, in general, it's not become more widespread. There's a supposition, there's a general belief, and I'm not sure it's true based on our experience in Utah, that more moderate candidates win under ranked choice. And I will tell you, it moderates the tone of an election, but we've not seen necessarily that it moderates the political philosophy of the candidates who get elected. But there's a widespread belief that that is true. And I think the parties in general, they really aren't interested in having moderates elected. That's not what parties want. Parties want people that are faithful to their platform, that believe strongly in the things they believe in. And I think that's part of the reason that there's been resistance as well.
Commissioner Ellenboss.
So in Alaska, between 2020 and 2024, how come it's not gaining popularity? seems to me, and this is just looking while you're here to see kind of what's going on in these different states, that in 2020, it barely passed, well, 50.5% of voters voted for it. In 2024, there was legislation or initiative to repeal.
Sure.
And it passed and they retained it by 743 votes.
Yep.
So why in 4 years aren't they like, this is awesome?
Sure. As I mentioned, federally, especially at a statewide level, Alaska is very red. And in 2020 and 2024, you had presidential election where Trump won in double digits. And so you had these super voters coming out who come out for presidential elections only, and President Trump has come out against ranked choice voting. And so it's easy to vote for President Trump and a repeal of ranked choice voting on a ballot. When you see polling, when you see the impacts of who's winning at the state level, kind of your more local, community races where candidates get that chance to connect with voters and really kind of vote on policies and priorities that are really impacting the lives of voters directly versus sometimes what federally are. The polling suggests, and those who are really advocating for ranked choice voting and understand the rules of running ranked choice voting are winning and maintaining their seats with larger margins now. And so I'd say on those two repeals, I think there's a connection between voting for at a presidential level with a president who is outright against ranked choice voting. Both Anchorage, again, the large municipality in Anchorage in Alaska is looking to implement it. I think if it passed in a city where you see that more often, you get voters who understand it at their own local level first versus a statewide level. And ranked choice voting is still relatively new. But if you see it at a state level or a county level, it tends to kind of stick around longer without those repeal efforts. But yeah, you're right, in 2020 and 2024, and they're trying to repeal it again. There's an effort to try to repeal it again. It was mentioned because Sarah Palin lost in 2020, the Republican Party was against it. Right now it's because of Lisa Murkowski, who is the US Senator, who's very moderate, who's been outspoken against Trump. And it's seen as a way to remove her from office as well.
Thank you. We are gonna take a break to give the commissioners a chance to stretch, but before we do that, I just want to make sure if any members of the public have questions, especially for our experts on Zoom. I know in some places it's past 11 p.m. So anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hands. Otherwise, we're gonna go to break until 8:07. And then we'll be back with more discussion. Oh wait, go ahead.
I would like to know if any of you have information about increased voter participation when they adopted ranked choice.
Go ahead, Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, I would say that it's mostly circumstantial evidence, because, it's sort of theory-based circumstantial evidence. I don't know that there's strong data to say that it increases or decreases voter turnout. Voter turnout's largely driven by the underlying issues in a particular campaign or race. In the example of city council elections, if there was a mayoral re-election year, more people participated. If there's a really hot button issue, more people participate. There's other factors that drive participation more than ranked choice, but there is a really good theory for why ranked choice voting could increase participation. And some, there's some evidence that this is true, is that, when you have more choices on the ballot, you're less likely to protest. You might say, well, my vote doesn't matter, so I'm not going to show up because it's only between A and B, and I don't like A or B, and so I'm not going to show up. Well, if actually you could show up and say, you know what, C's my number one, and maybe C's my only choice, but maybe I can live with B. Just the mere fact of being able to have more choices and a more robust way to voice your preferences, it's an incentive to participate more. And we have seen some evidence of that, but I don't know that you're going to find an academic study that says for certain that it increases or that it decreases participation.
We have a many decades history of using it in Cambridge. And I will tell you, after so many years, what I've observed is that we have a different effect when it comes to voters being, telling you that old saw, my vote doesn't matter. And this is the effect. Believe it or not, incumbents, when all 9 seats are up for election, nobody's holding a seat. They're not really incumbents, except they're sitting in the seat now. Incumbents tend to get reelected, just like plurality voting elections. And when that happens, voter participation can lag. People figure, hey, they're just going to be the same incumbents that are always elected. An interesting thing happens though when one incumbent decides to retire. The participation goes way up in terms of the voters and potential candidates, because everybody realizes there's this one free seat, even though they're all 9 of them are free seats. There's this one free seat, one seat where the person's no longer running. So we get better participation there. But we're talking about, that's a pretty deep history, decades and decades and decades of ranked choice elections.
Okay, well, it's now 8:01, so we're gonna take a break until 8:11, and then we'll come back with some more discussion.
Okay, it's 8:11. I'm gonna call this meeting back to order. For joining us.
And we'll be all but I need to. I need to be able to say.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, folks, I'm gonna ask you to rejoin us, please, for the remainder of the meeting. We're gonna hear first from Commissioner Fitzjordan. Something you have prepared, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I submitted, just as an example, some strike-through language for what ranked choice voting could look like in Whatcom County. I want to really stress that, this is a system that is mix and match. It's a choose your own adventure. There's so many different structures it can take. I just thought it would be useful to have something to discuss or something to talk about for the commission. So sent this language through in this model. The really baseline of the model is just utilizing ranked choice voting in the primary system. And using that as a structure to narrow it to the top two. So general elections would still functionally be the same. You would still have two candidates in that election, and you would simply go through and rank candidates up to 5 in the primary system. I won't go over and reiterate many of the benefits to ranked choice voting because we had some presenters who did a really good job of doing that. For me, I think one of the key factors for it is trying to take some of the game theory out of elections for voters. I think especially thinking about our top 2 primary system, where you can have an election in a 50-50 jurisdiction where you might have 4 candidates from one side of the spectrum and 2 candidates from another. And there's a rationale that you have to undergo as a voter of who is the one person that I'm going to put the weight of my vote behind. And if that ends up to split, you can end up locking an entire constituency out of the general election. So for me, I do feel like ranked choice voting is a way of ensuring that there is someone, no matter what, that maximizes the representation, that ensures that voters have the ability to find themselves in a candidate, and a way that ensures that our governance structure is as reflective as it can be of the challenges that we face. And that voters are able to take a look at candidates on the basis of their issue priorities, whether that's agriculture or natural resources, or law and justice, community safety, transportation, and really talk about the work and not the personalities. So that is just, I think, the basis of that example in front of you, and I would definitely welcome any discussion or questions on that. I know that I've had many conversations with a couple of different good members from District 2 about different systems and different structures that can be used. I think they'll probably be able to talk to that later on, but other than that, we'll just thank the commission for taking a look at this example language.
Go ahead, Commissioner Redding.
Yeah, I've got a question and a possible follow-up on depending on what your answer is, because I'm confused about something here. I'm trying to figure out whether the up to 5 or whatever, is that you let everybody run in the primary then, and then you take the top 5, is that it? Or
not quite. So everyone runs in the primary and you rank the candidates in that primary election, and that narrows it to the top 2 then going forward to the top.
Okay, now there was something in there about limiting it to 5.
Yeah, I mean, other jurisdictions have typically said like just in terms of like the columns, right? How many candidates can you rank? I mean, there are certainly jurisdictions that we've heard from today that don't have a limit on that. You can rank upwards of 8, 9 candidates. I think this was just an example of, you know, pulling from another jurisdiction that had 5. And that's it.
Oh, so it's not determining that 5 people will have the privilege of being in the
No.
election. It's just as many as want to can be, and then the rank choice is just going to narrow, it's going to narrow it down to?
So you have 20 people running in the primary, and then you get to rank up to 5, and then it runs through the runoff until you have 2 that are remaining.
Okay, thanks for that.
Commissioner Caldwell? No? Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
So why can't we just have an open general? Instead of having the top 2 for the primary go to the general, we just have an open general.
Open general.
And yeah, then people
plurality
can
or-
just vote on the one candidate they.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets to some of the issues that have been described, where if we have, you know, you say 20 candidates run through to, actually, I'm gonna pick a more realistic number, 8 candidates run through to the general in any local election. Again, I mean, you end up with, as a voter, being in a place where you are running through a game theory of who has the greatest likelihood of winning. You know, I think for me, just as a voter, I don't see it as a game. I see it as something that does, I think, impact our day-to-day lives, and that I think should be able to encompass the nuance of that and of our different criteria that we are each using as we're going through our ballots, and our different weighting that we're going to use. I mean, some of us are going to weight public safety higher than transportation, and I think that is better encompassed in ranked choice voting. That isn't just like the plurality of like pick one and hope that they have the support to be able to.
So I'm wondering, Brad was asking about doing ranked choice voting in the general election, yeah? That's what you
No,
meant?
just having instead of having like a top 2 from the primary go to the general.
Okay.
You just have an open general. Just
The-
pick one.
The issue is because like he showed an example, then you end up with somebody who only gets 17% winning. Whereas if you take the lowest one out at each level until you get the one that the most people are supporting, you get the most people having a say in who represents us. Like, I'm all about power to the people, not necessarily a party line, right? You don't listen to me talk, you know that's true. So for me, when I'm listening to these experts talk, I don't want to silence any voices. I think everybody should have a say. So if you were to just do an open general election, you might get somebody that got the majority of the votes, but it's like 17%. It's not 50%. Whereas if you just take the lowest one out each time, you get to somebody who most people say.
Can I clarify this 50% issue really quick? So when we talk about 50%, and I think this was pointed out by a speaker earlier, but it maybe bears reiterating that this is one of the things that's so important to do the voter ed on, because the math is like different, right, than we're used to. But it's 50% of each round, because you do this in runoff. So kind of like Eamon showed us that there's like a round. By the time you get to the last round, it's 50% of whatever those results are. And it's a percentage, it's not 50% of the total votes of the first round. Because some ballots will be exhausted, meaning some ballots will only have one choice or two choices, and so they won't make it all the way to the final round. But what you do want to do is make sure that if you are pulling out candidates on the bottom, so like you've got the least number of candidates that you're pulling out and you're putting their second choices in, you want to make sure that you end up counting every vote. And so part of the way that this is calculated is that you're both counting top votes and you're counting the next vote, the next vote, the next vote. Even when you pull out the ballots of the the bottom sort of winner in each round, those votes are not actually wasted. If they have a next choice, those next choices are kicking in. So it changes the math completely. And it's a little bit difficult to explain without visuals. And I do have a visual later that might show that better. But basically, you will end up with 50% of your overall end pool that will, a 51% that wins it. It's just that it's not an exact number the way it is in a plurality vote where it's just boom, you vote once. So I hope that clarifies. If it's not, we'll get there with the visuals.
Also for clarity, there is a scenario in which you don't have a primary and you have a general that's ranked choice. That's another scenario, right? Just, I think a speaker spoke to that earlier. I see Commissioner Mutchler, go ahead.
Thank you. When we voted for ourselves, we were allowed to vote 3 candidates. If you voted for, that part of your ballot was invalidated. It was an overvote. Likewise, on a simple, when you have 2 people, if you vote for both people, that part of your ballot is invalidated. I'm wondering, and our guests might be able to help with this, if a person makes some mistakes and marks 2 first places and forgets to do a third or something like that, does that invalidate their vote if they don't precisely do in order as many of the candidates that they choose? If they do something, if they do first or something like that, does that invalidate that part of the ballot? And how often does that happen?
In Cambridge, that is the most common mistake that a voter makes. And it's not exactly what you think. The machine is an optical scanner. We have programmed it to, when a voter inserts that in the ballot box, to actually send it back to the voter and say, is this really what you intended? And if the voter says, yes, it is put in what we call an auxiliary ballot box so that a human being can look at it. And I've looked at hundreds of these overvotes where somebody has apparently voted their first choice for 2 candidates. And it turns out that the majority of them are the voter goes in, they mark somebody to be their first choice, realize it's not who they wanted, and with their black pen, cross out the oval and then mark in another oval. So that when a human being looks at it, it's fairly obvious. I can't even think of a time when the election commissioners voted in the negative, not to accept the vote. The voter's intent was they crossed it out. There's a big cross mark there. The optical scanner read it as an overvote, but it really wasn't. And that's the most common one. We do get some where people actually do. A human looks at it, yeah, they mark 2 ovals and there's no way to discern the voter's intent. So that vote has to get rejected. Usually it's given back to the voter though. We have polling places. It's more problematic. I love mail-in voting, by the way, so I don't want to discourage you from doing that. But when the voter's actually there, it will give the ballot back to them and say, is this really what you meant? And they have another chance.
And in our experience in Utah, where we do vote, mail-in voting, similar to Washington State, we don't always have that opportunity to give the voter direct feedback and give them a chance to correct their ballot. So we do have ballots that have errors on them. And the percentage of that we experienced was akin to those that might otherwise overvote and undervote in other traditional elections, like the example where they voted for Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So you might have a voter who gives you 2 first place choices. That can happen. It does happen. That happens very, very rarely. What we see more often is they'll skip rankings. I definitely know who my first choice is, and I definitely know who my second choice is, but then I'm going to skip 3rd place and put somebody 4th place. Or maybe I know who my first and second choice are, but everyone else is my 5th choice. And in any case where you provide the same ranking to 2 candidates, yeah, that is a spoiled ballot from that point on. But the beauty of that is that if they had a first choice and a second choice and a third choice, and those were all valid and correct, well, those can all be counted. We don't care that you gave us 3 or 4 fourth and fifth choices. We can ignore those because that's indiscernible, but you at least did provide your first choice and your second choice and your third choice or what have you. So what we see most common, and that would depend on the rules that you set. I think the best practice is that some jurisdictions will allow multiple skipped rankings. So for example, you could say, well, you got a first choice, a second choice, and for whatever reason, you skipped third and fourth and you put somebody fifth. So that fifth place must be like a third place. You could choose that rule. Some jurisdictions say, you know, I think what the voter's telling us is that they very much hate their fifth place vote, maybe. And so we're only going to count the rankings that are sequential, 1, 2, 3. If you skip 2 or more rankings, maybe you invalidate the rest. The rules that we followed was that 1 skipped ranking was a mistake, basically, but 2 skipped rankings was a statement. And so we didn't count anything that was a 2 skipped ranking and beyond, but we did count it if it was just 1 skipped ranking. Obviously, you cannot count something if it's the same ranking, and at that point, you have to ignore the rest of the ballot if they've ranked 2 third places. But the instances of that occurring is, like I say, on par with those that already currently under plurality voting either don't vote at all, like an undervote, or they mark multiple candidates like an overvote. But I will tell you, you were keying in on the idea where you have what some call block plurality voting, where let's say you're electing 2 at-large candidates. That means oftentimes you can mark 2 names. You might have a list of 4 or more names, and then each voter can mark 2 names and 2 winners will be selected. What we actually see in that system, which is what we use in Utah for our multiple at-large seats, is we'll see voters who bullet vote, meaning they only use 1 vote instead of the 2 votes that they're entitled to. And the reason for that is there's a natural incentive and strategy to just vote for your most favored candidate, because if you vote for another candidate, that candidate might be somewhat more popular than your most favored or most preferred or first choice candidate. And so because you don't want to undermine your first choice, all of a sudden now we're using ranked choice language, but this is plurality voting, you simply only use 1 of your 2 votes. And we see that bullet voting happening upwards of 15 to 20% of voters in races where we've had block plurality voting. And so that bullet voting incentive is a reason to give voters the opportunity to tell you, hey, I know that 2 people are going to win, but this is my first choice, this is my second choice, this is my third and my fourth and my fifth, rather than, hey, 2 of these people are going to win, you have 2 votes, and all of a sudden you're saying, well, Joe told me just to vote for Joe. Because if I vote for Susie, she's really popular. Everybody thinks Susie's going to win. And maybe I'm okay with Susie winning, but I really want Joe to win. So I'm only going to use 1 of my votes. Now you've disenfranchised yourself as a voter because the rules create an incentive, this bullet voting incentive. And that's actually one of the reasons that municipalities in Utah chose to use ranked choice voting, was because it eliminated that incentive to bullet vote in a block plurality system where you have multiple winners.
Commissioner Ordos.
I just 2 quick questions. One for the gentleman in Cambridge. What is your voter registration population? Like how big is that pool?
71,000 registered voters in the city of Cambridge.
Okay, great. Thank you.
71.
And then is there ballot observing, and what's that experience for ballot observers in this process, and whomever would like to answer? I don't know if our gentleman from Alaska is still here.
In our case, and it would be very similar to yours with mail-in voting, we have very transparent ballot tabulation centers where members of the public can come watch the process, where ballot envelopes are received and opened and counted and scanned. And then the point that Tom was making about where you're visually looking at a ballot, that's what we call adjudication. That happens a lot when you have maybe a write-in race or you have unclear marks on the ballot. And I know that Washington's at the cutting edge of transparency and election administration, We borrowed, a few ideas from counties in Washington. We had a room where people could come in, they could look at the screen. We invited the campaigns to review. And so when that ballot adjudication takes place, when election judges are analyzing the ballot and saying, oh, look, the machine said it was unclear. The reason for that is that they crossed out Joe's name and they circled Susie's name. So the bubbles weren't read correctly, but we know that it was a vote for Susie. That's a judgment call of election judges. That adjudication process was always transparent in my experience, and in the counties in Washington where I've seen the election tabulation centers, they have similar protocols where members of the public, observers, party members, campaigns can come and watch a lot of that happening.
Thank you. Commissioner Redding, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I checked with our legal counsel, and apparently charter counties in Washington have the right to bypass the normal requirement of having a top two election. And so in principle, we could be going straight to the general election, which has been pointed out here. You have much bigger turnout in the general election anyways. And another name for ranked choice is instant runoff voting. So I'm wondering why we wouldn't maybe consider that. Is there a reason for that?
I think it's a perfectly valid thing to consider. This is just an option. That's
I
not
see.
necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
That's right.
I was wondering about that too, like, I think we're still in the group building phase, and so that's kind of exciting to be able to talk about that a little bit, but so I was wondering also if we would go to just the general, it seems like it would save money too.
So
Is that true or not
I do
true?
think that the county auditor addressed this a little bit, the concept that even if we eliminate the primary and Whatcom County races, there are still local jurisdictions throughout the county that will be
Okay,
using.
that's right, I remember that.
Commissioner Elbaz?
Yes, I would remind the body that this, in a committee of the whole, your goal is to come out at the end of this meeting with a proposal, not one that the commission can approve tonight, but it becomes what we then vote on. It goes on our agenda and we vote on, and it's not going to continue to take a bunch of time. So unless we do that tonight, we have failed in this process, and we just put this kicking it down the road, taking up all kinds of time. So if you have something, if you guys have something that you want to do, I would suggest you make that proposal, and that's what we work towards giving a favorable nod or no. And it only takes a simple majority tonight for that to happen, if that's your goal. So please do that. Let's just not put it off to another meeting. This is your opportunity.
With appreciation, I've passed my gavel. I want to say that this is such a complex issue, and we've heard from so many people by email, by public comment, and there are a lot of different options being shared here tonight. So I want to say we do still have time, at least one meeting where amendments can be introduced. And so I'm really interested in hearing some other options that commissioners have put together. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't want to totally wrap this up if we're not done. I just wanted to speak to that primary money saving cost question, which I actually asked Tom about that. I was like, what, do you have a sense of like cost and like what is saved when we're not doing a primary? And his take, although I guess he could speak for himself, but I'll just sum it up, was that probably over time, less primaries, it is going to pay for itself over time. The other thing that you'll see in this later amendment draft proposal is that I did put a line in there that saying that the council could decide to enact RCB for other county positions. And so that is like built into that mix. And so that would minimize the number of people in primaries over time if the county found it to be favorable. But overall, I think we will see enough savings in small ways that it will end up paying for itself. Yeah, that's what it is.
In the interest of time, do you want to, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I was just for future, it looks like we're gonna have some more discussion perhaps, or a presentation by Commissioner Morales I just wanted to do a placehold before the end of the night that I do have something to say, but I don't wanna, it's not germane to the presentation, so I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Are you feeling? Okay, so okay, so we have this amendment which, is sort of keeps our 7 seats, right? It keeps our 2 at large, that Joel offered us. Our sort of goal was to bring like multiple things to discuss. That was the point of the discussion meeting, and so there's a second one in here. And I wanna draw your attention to your first, like, I don't know if everyone had time this busy week to check this out, but this is like a stationary, non-moving, not animated kind of rounds of voting, what that looks like. And there is that sort of like 25% line there to show you. So we're gonna watch a little video, which is a little bit goofy because it's about cookie selection. But I think that when you want to ground it in a more serious example, this is an actual election example. But this I feel like is very pedestrian, and I think for everybody watching on Zoom and everyone can really understand this example. So this is an example of what proportional ranked choice voting looks like. Tom gave us kind of a narrative example a little bit with Cambridge. This elects 3 candidates out of a group. And so you'll kind of see how this works. So can we do that up?
Proportional ranked choice voting, also known as single transferable vote, is used when electing multiple representatives at once to offices like city council, school board, or legislature. In elections of this type, candidates are elected in relation to their level of support to produce proportional representation. Voters rank their ballots in order of preference. To be elected, candidates must meet a vote threshold. The threshold is determined by the number of seats to be elected. For example, we can use proportional representation if we are planning a party and want to select which 3 cookie types to serve for dessert. In this example, we start with 6 cookies. If we are selecting 3 winners, the threshold for a winner is 25% of the votes plus 1 vote. This threshold is the minimum number of votes needed to elect all of the seats. If 3 candidates each get more than 25%, it is impossible for another candidate to get enough votes to be elected. Chocolate chip has enough first choices to win and is selected. In fact, it has more votes than needed, which is called a surplus. The surplus votes are then distributed to those voters' second choices. No other cookies have enough votes, so we must eliminate the cookie with the fewest votes. Ginger snaps are in last place, and their voters' ballots transfer to their next choice. Sugar cookies now have enough votes and are elected. Their surplus is transferred to the voters' next preference. That surplus transfer gives snickerdoodles enough votes to be elected. We now have our dessert selection. Proportional representation helps ensure voters have equal power to elect someone who shares their values. Visit our website at rcvresources.org to learn more about our.
Okay, and then there's another example as well that I would love to just show you, which is just animated, and I'll just talk us through it. But the important difference between this and the single winner is that win threshold. So the percentage threshold is sort of set in this very different way. Can you pull that up, Kristen? And this animated example is also really helpful to watch because you can watch the votes moving around without all the cookie stimulation if you're someone like me who loves cookies.
Move
okay.
This issue. And how to do it.
All right, so this is what round 1 looks like. You can see round 2 goes and the votes will just move around. So you watch the surplus kind of go and you can watch the sort of threshold that they have to meet. So when somebody has extra votes, those get shaved off as well. So like if someone goes over that threshold, then those other choices get shaved off as well. I don't know if that helped, but just to visualize how this works. So essentially, when you have a multi-candidate election, then you take the number of seats that you have, and you have to look at like the total number of votes, you have like, if you have 3 candidates that you want, then you're looking at 25% plus 1. So you take the number of candidates plus 1 candidate, and they need 25% plus 1. If you have more than that, right, you adjust the percentage accordingly. If you need, 4 winners, right, then you're gonna change that a little bit. So ultimately, you are still electing what the majority wants, but you do it in a very different way, where you're just getting a proportional chunk of, if you have per se like a district, you're getting a proportion of that district that elects their favorite. So one of the reasons that I'm a fan of this is because if you stick with a plurality style, then you end up ignoring the minority groups in your district. So if you have a libertarian minority, or if you have a Republican minority in a district, then you don't actually end up emerging with seats if they are a minority. If they are less than 50%, they're just not going to get representation. So one of the concerns, around thinking about the long haul, like this is a once every 10 year kind of opportunity to think about representation. One of the concerns in thinking about the long haul is if we know that there's a trend in our county that is steadily moving towards a minority group of voters, we kind of need to protect those people's voice. It doesn't really matter whether we agree with that position or not. Part of, to me anyway, what our folks have called it a democracy or a republic or a democratic republic, ultimately, we're all very interested in representation. So part of what's important to me about this is that we do actually have a representative democracy or a republic or whatever you want to call it. I ultimately think that our vote is the most sacred thing that we can do in that system. And so if some of us are actually denied representation and we have to choose something we don't want, and we get an elected official that doesn't represent us, that seems unfair to me. So I know in previous public comments, some folks have voiced, why this is very untrustworthy. Why would a progressive, be fighting for, representation of Republicans? But to me, that's because what I actually care about is people and people's voices and people being able to vote. And so for me, that is logical, because the kind of person that I am wants everybody to have a voice. So I want us to look at this amendment proposal really quick and just see if you all had a chance to read through it and if you had questions about it. I'll give you a brief overview.
Commissioner Ellenboss, did you have a question about what's just been?
Well, I have the floor and I would love to just go through this really quickly, if that's okay, unless we're running out of time.
There is no time limit on a committee of the whole. Go ahead.
Cool. So I just want to draw like the basics out, which is that this would create, because we have to sort of, when we look at proportional ranked choice voting, it's really best to have an odd number, and it's best to have more candidates in a district. One of the concerns that I've heard from all over the place is, well, but we want geographic representation. We don't want to lose that. And so this plan basically tries to make a compromise. This plan says, let's make bigger, fewer districts with more candidates. Let's get rid of the at-large positions that everybody has, or many people have expressed they absolutely hate. It would up the number of council members from 7 to 9 in order to achieve that. So that is a change. But if you think about the long haul in 10 years and the fact that our population is growing, that might not be a terrible idea. And then the other thing that this does, I guess 2 main things that this would enact are an election transition commission that is made up of council members, representatives of the public, and then also folks from the auditor's office to write out that plan, to like all of the stuff that came up here around like, well, how do you count the ballot? How do you allow curing of a ballot? Those kinds of things. The budgeting, the software choice, the ballot choices, all of that stuff needs to get figured out. And so one of the things that I cared about in thinking this through was that the public would have direct input. And I thought that a commission might be a way to solve that. So to have actual representatives of the public on that transition commission in order to make sure that it is accountable to the people and have meetings that are public and accountable to the people. So that's one of the things in here. And then at the very end, I did take the liberty of throwing something in which might be a different amendment, really. But a suggesting of a change of the name of our commission to an assembly instead, so that it would come out of the category of being confused with appointed commissions and would instead be its own unique elected role in our county. And that was just sort of a harebrained idea. It kind of came in at the last minute and I stuck it in there because it flowed about with all the other things that we were changing, but it doesn't have to stay in there. This is just a suggested draft. So, yeah, thank you.
Sure, of course. Commissioner Elbas?
Yes, Madam Chair. By way of explanation, let me first say that because I don't get this email, this is my sitting down tonight was the first time to see what you talked about. But we have decided in our committee of the whole to spend a lot of time getting more information. All of them were exceptional in their presentations. But I'm concerned about the fact that we have 19 more amendments and we're still kicking this down the road. The only thing before us that I was aware of was we were coming in here to deal with Mr. Fitzjordan's proposal. And so at this point, admittedly, people here should not think this means I support the concept. I wish to take the prerogative to move that we recommend to the commission the language as proposed by Mr. Fitzjordan. Again, with the caveat, remember, this is just to have a decision by this group that goes to the commission. And this does not in any, I'm not trying to pull any wool over anybody's eyes. This doesn't mean I support this, but I'm trying to get us to move along without wasting more time. So that is my motion, Madam Chair, that we take Mr. Fitzjordan's item presented to us on the agenda for tonight, and we move that forward. It just takes a simple majority of this body to authorize it, the report of this committee of the whole, to go to our commission for us to then vote on, following, I presume, reasonable timeframes for discussion and or amendment. My proposal.
Understood. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
I heard Brad and Job.
I'd really like us to, can I comment?
So we have a motion, a second, go ahead, Commissioner.
I would love us to actually discuss this too, before we make that kind of a determination of what, I mean, you're not at the end of our meeting. I think we can have some discussion on this. I was hopeful that we would see these as different options. They are very different. And that we would have some discussion about them, because my understanding, and I don't know if this is your understanding, Commissioner Jordan, was that part of the goal of having this discussion among us in a more free and open way and a learning kind of way was for us to kind of understand what we liked and didn't like about a proposal and come up with something that would be helpful for all of us to move forward. So.
Well, by way of explanation, that does not take away the opportunity for that to happen at a meeting, but this meeting was called for this specific thing and or modification. I want to see us come out. We didn't do that with the last committee of the whole, and I want to see us come out of it with a decision. I feel fine with voting in favor of that here to go before the commission. It's just I'm giving the caveat that that doesn't mean I support in a final vote to go to the council.
Can I just, point of clarification, Commissioner Fitzjordan, sorry. Did you file this as yours as an amendment officially?
This is not.
It's a
it was
discussion
not
draft.
official,
Yeah, both of
proposal,
these are
but,
discussion drafts, so they're not for a vote to move forward per se in a formal way. But if a show of approval would be fine, I suppose.
Commissioner Redding?
Yeah, I wanted to point out as well that the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive, because the proposal for doing a multi-member ranked choice thing for, say, the county council does not mean that you use that. Obviously, you wouldn't use that for the county executive, for all the executives, right? For all those other things would be by a regular ranked choice. So I just want to point out, you can have one and the other, but you have to specify what they would be used for.
And just speaking to that, I did build that in actually to the one that I proposed. So it has single winner ranked choice voting similar, but without a primary. So I think what we've got here is a proposal that keeps a primary. And so that is one of the questions I think that I'm very interested in how people feel about, because I built in a non-primary RCV for just like the executive roles into this proposal draft as well. So it is a combo of both, but it's not with a primary. So I think that's a really critical question for me about, you know, our commission. How do we feel about that? Do we want to love our primaries? Are we interested in just sort of being more efficient and doing instant runoff in a general? What is our take on that?
Commissioner Collins?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to clarify, so if, I think I'm a little confused about what the advantage is of voting on something tonight. Like, how is that different than introducing something at the May 12th meeting where we still can? And I guess, and if you could also clarify, like, this would put sort of like a placeholder on our agenda, but like it could take a very different form than this specific proposal.
Permission to answer?
Absolutely.
As I said, and I'm repeating myself, I understand. But you guys, there's not a person here evidently that understands the significance of what we've got in front of us to accomplish. And the negative result of our just holding a committee of the whole specifically for this purpose, and are not coming out of this meeting with some proposal to the body, the commission that we sit on, to render a decision. We are just taking a hell of a lot of time, and we don't have the time, and I'm trying to kick us in the rear end to get us to do what we're supposed to do as citizens representatives, make some progress. If you don't want to do it, essentially what you're saying is, we don't care about the rest of the time, we don't care about the rest of the amendments, we don't give that a high enough priority to render a decision on this. That's what I'm saying, and that's the reason I'm trying to do it.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of came into this meeting expecting that we would, my hope was ultimately that we would come out of this like with a proposal that most of us could agree on roughly. Like, we were gonna come here, we were gonna understand what we didn't like, what we didn't, or what we did and what we didn't like, maybe come to a compromise and pull something out. So I agree, that was my preference for this too. I don't see how immediately, if I like Commissioner Fitzjordan's proposal, but I'd be curious to hear if, you know, my colleagues have things that they would be interested in changing to that would get them from a hard no to maybe, right? And if we just are immediately voting to throw it on, to me, that kind of is jumping the gun a little bit. Isn't the whole point for us to talk about these proposals? And I know we're getting to 9 p.m. I'm down to keep going, because I really want to make some progress here today. So I mean, if the whole body wants to just throw it to a vote, sure, but I would be really curious to like discuss the merits. And I also have a proposal here that I've realized last night was living in my draft, the draft of my email for the weekend. So my apologies on that. That kind of compromises between these two, which I would love to share, but I'm also happy to workshop it later. So it's my bad for not getting it in. So I would just be curious to hear perspectives on the merits of this proposal, the specific details, before we just immediately vote to bring it up at the next time.
Commissioner Wright, Commissioner McDonald.
I am here tonight to learn and work together with people. I think hearing different people's ideas and then coming back with something later is more in the spirit of what I'm like here to do as an elected person. I don't want to force something through, and also I think we do have our time, and if we get rushed, we're not going to come up with the best decision. Also, I think that if Commissioner Fitzjordan was bringing it here as a draft for discussion, we should have the like ability to do that with each other. Yes.
Commissioner Butler.
Yeah, and I think, I support what Commissioner Allenboss is doing because it's great risk that this proposal could die tonight. And so by approving Council Commissioner Fitzgerald's version, you have something that's moving ahead that you can replace, you can modify, you could amend all sorts of things to it. But I think he's correct that it needs to move forward, or else not only is this item at risk of not moving forward and even having a vote, as all the other items are at risk too. So I think there's a timeliness question that he's correct about. So all this does is takes a proposal, which is a reasonable proposal if you're supporting fair choice voting, ranked choice voting, and it gets to the next step so that it can be worked into a form to a final vote.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, just want to clarify kind of the intention here. And, you know, for me, I don't believe in the concept of perfect legislation. I think conversation is important about any proposal. I really want to not only get feedback from commissioners, but get feedback from the public, hear from everyone about what not only this proposal brings forward to the table, but the other proposals the other options that are essentially in front of this commission. For me, I very much see this work as being a collaborative piece of work that can move forward, but my intention was not necessarily for this to be a official amendment proposal, but really, again, what's again an option. And again, I want to be able to bring in as much discussion as possible, and that could even look like discussion further on tonight. I mean, like good member from District 2 noted, we are at 9 p.m. I'm happy to continue this discussion. This discussion can happen offline, and just I think my intention was that we would have this discussion and then come back at our May 22nd meeting, our last meeting, to bring amendment proposals forward with something that is a little more refined.
Mr. Morales.
That tracks with what I understood I was here to do as well. I put forward something that is very much all throughout this says this is a draft discussion. An amendment could look like this. This might look like this. I'm very interested in us actually talking through the pieces that are interesting to folks. We're not interesting. I really want to know where we're at. So I'd be very much in favor of doing like temperature read votes, votes by hand about how people feel about various pieces of these. But I'm not really, as you would say, fixing to send something like with approval as like a single final thing. I don't know that that's what I came here to do.
Mr.
I am just noticing we're taking a lot of time with this and it seems very distracting and we're not hearing from each other or the public. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for the person who made that to potentially consider withdrawing it, because so we can move forward with discussion. Would be amenable since we've like heard other people or having more discussion.
In a similar spirit, I think it sort of reached the opposite conclusion that it seems to me that I don't know why we can't continue having our discussion, and there's no harm in advancing something, right? We can still come back to amend that. We can still look at multi-member districts, and I would sooner just I think there's a vote on the floor. So I would sooner just vote for it, and then I want to hear about Colton's, and I want to discuss mine more.
I'd like to hear from Commissioner Chadwick. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I just, for clarification, I think what Councilmember Allenboss, the senior, we'll call him Farmer Jim, is trying to propose here is just a little different rules when we have a committee of the whole like this. So trying to move it along, not circumventing the fact that if there'll still be a discussion at the next meeting, but at least moving this forward and knowing that it's a topic that we're going to discuss and ultimately vote on, and then we can move on to other items. That's what I believe is the intent, and I agree with that.
Mr. Redding.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe, and correct me if I'm mistaken, Joe. I was thinking maybe what you're intending here is the equivalent of an introduction, right? So that we would be full into something in the next meeting, so that we don't have an introduction in the next meeting and then delay to yet another meeting, kicking the can further down the road. So am I correct about that or am I wrong?
Well, the bottom underlying situation, everybody here is speaking some truth in what they're saying. But the bottom line we need to recognize is that failure to move ahead is going to have us to perform our duty meeting every other night of the week, if this is how we're going to handle it. And quite frankly, I think at some point, it just might be prudent of the chair, sensing that, to say, well, let's have a straw vote on how many intend to vote for ranked choice voting. And if you don't get the 10, we just realize the reality of it and go to those other items where we may have the opportunity to agree. Because I do believe there are several issues where we do have 10 votes and we're not voting on those because we're going to be taking all kinds of time doing this. That's what I'm asking you to realize. And that's not just my opinion. That's having been on various commissions where that's what it ends up. Sometimes 2 meetings a day in order to accomplish it. So let's avoid that if we can.
While I appreciate the input, I want to point out that the committee of the whole that we've called here tonight is for this purpose of discussing different models of ranked choice voting. We've also received today 17 emails in favor of ranked choice voting, 2 against. We heard robust public comment tonight, and we had presenters from all across the country. So this isn't just a minor issue. This is something that many people who live here in Whatcom County care very deeply about. So I think it's worth the time that it takes. Seeing Commissioner Muchler.
Yeah, thank you. I guess we've had robust conversations on every vote that we've had as a group. I guess I thought it was a very good presentation from the 4 guests and here, but I guess I wish there had been a guest invited who would present the other side of this particular issue. I don't think he or she was invited. Maybe a Democrat from Massachusetts that doesn't like ranked choice voting. Because it seems like I make better decisions when I hear both sides. And so I guess when I came tonight, I thought there might be a more balanced presentation. And so that's left up to us, I guess.
Mr. Cole.
Yeah, in the interest of the efficiency of time, and I do know we still have Commissioner Ellenboss Senior's proposal. Chair, I'd be curious just to run the vote on getting Commissioner Jordan's get it introduced at the next meeting right now, or I would like to call the question if you.
Having heard multiple perspectives on this issue.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
I'm not in favor of keeping primaries, so you could get a no vote from me.
Okay.
They shouldn't forget they've got the opportunity to amend my motion. Crying out loud, folks. You're quick enough to do that, aren't you?
Commissioner Redding, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to amend your motion. And that would be that we advance both the concept of a ranked choice vote. I will propose for the unitary positions, in other words, for when we're electing executives, for instance, and also of the multi-member ranked choice for the purpose of the county council, because it does address the issue that many have complained about the at-large positions, and it also provides for representation for groups that are now represented. Like, for instance, all the rural Democrats have no representation, and all the urban Republicans have no representation. So this is something that gets at some of these issues, and that is at least worth considering, it would seem to me. So I would like to make that motion to be to advance both of those in the form of, I guess it's an introduction, yes. And then the details can be, obviously can be fine-tuned for the, so that would be my amendment.
So the amendment is to recommend to the commission the language as proposed by Commissioners Pitts Jordan and Commissioner Ann Morales. To recommend that language to the commission at the following meeting. Is that correct?
I need a second.
I was second. Oh, yeah. Okay. So we have a movement and a second. Staff, will you please call the
Can I
roll?
just clarify what you wrote down and what?
Motion to
Commissioner Redding said?
recommend to the commission the language as proposed by Commissioners Pitts Jordan and Morales.
As in a unified proposal or as in two? I guess I'm unclear if we're moving two or if we're moving unified. Can you clarify
Can you
that?
clarify?
Commissioner Redding?
Well, it could be either, and I would let that be something for all, for
Consensus.
to work out. But the idea would be so that we're considering both ranked choice, regular ranked choice for the unitary positions and multi-member for the county council.
Commissioner Thompson?
Just a clarification, is this advancement to first reading, where we would then need to vote again to send it to the proper 2/3, or is this in effect, the moving it past the first reading to the second vote, which requires the 2/3? Just want to be clear about.
It's my understanding that this moves it to discussion and vote at the May 22nd meeting. Is that your intent?
Yeah.
Go
Can I
ahead.
clarify, is this a vote on the amendments or the main motion?
No.
On the amendment first.
So a vote on Mr. Redding's amendment. You know, honestly, people, we could do this as two separate motions as well. I mean, I think we're really splitting hairs here at a late hour. So I think we can move forward with this amendment. At which point we wouldn't need the original, but in any case, and I'm being told that we don't need a roll call on this, so we can do this by consensus.
Great.
Is there anyone?
The second for me too, please.
The original second was Munchler, the amendment second was Commissioner Rienstra.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. You look so confused, Commissioner Ordos. You're good? Okay.
Rightfully so.
Okay, okay. So we're gonna vote on the amendment. Are there any objections to doing this by consent?
I'm not gonna vote.
I'm not voting. You might have to roll call it.
Okay, I think it's gonna be easier for us to have a roll call on this. And the amended motion is to recommend to the commission the language as proposed by Commissioners Fitzjordan and Morales.
Madam Chair, the normal protocol is for a single member to ask for a roll call and then you could do it. But otherwise, the chair doesn't call for that.
We have discussed this now for about 40 minutes.
No, I'm just asking.
I just asked for a roll call.
Yeah, so that takes, that, now you can do it.
All right, let's do it.
Amy Collins,
Yes.
Liz Darrow,
Yes.
Joe Ellenboss,
No,
Lindsey Graham Ellenboss, no. Colton Colvin-Belt,
Yes.
Brad Kelly,
No.
Maya Morales,
Yes.
John Mutchler,
No.
Anna Ordos,
No.
Bill Fitzjordan,
Aye.
Andrew Redding,
Yes.
Jessica Rienstra,
Yes.
Jennifer Wright,
Yes.
Jeff Chadwick.
No.
And that passes 8-6 with one commissioner absent, excused. Okay. Commissioner Colton, would you like to go ahead with your proposal?
Sure. Yeah, again, apologies for not getting this to you all before. I should probably check my draft folders more, but it's so simple. I'm gonna say that I can explain it super simply, and it's a feature, not a bug. So when we talk about like complexity and it being complicated, I don't think often we're talking about like the actual ranking of the ballot. I think that's pretty self-evident. I think it's like how do we counting the votes? If we're doing proportional system, are we districting? Like, I think that's where the complexity comes in, at least for me. Like the actual voting 1, 2, 3, 4 seems simple to me. So I've been like trying to think about what's a good compromise between Commissioner Fitzjordan's model, which I think starts to get us in the direction of ranked choice voting, right? Keeps it in the primary, and goes to a general, kind of maintains the system that we're used to. And then on the other end, we have Commissioner Morales' model, where we're doing a proportional system, we're potentially redistricting. There's a lot of change there, and I think that's the best version of ranked choice voting in a lot of ways. And generally, but there's also a lot of change for voters to have to digest. And I'm a very practical, pragmatic guy. I like to find the middle area where it's like, okay, we're gonna get the most bang for our buck without upending the system and getting people really worried about like, whoa, what are we doing here? So, and that's kind of why I've been leaning towards the model that Alaska is used, because I think in a lot of ways it kind of does that. So I have some language here where I've tried to adapt that, and I will intend to get this emailed all out to you tomorrow, so that you can actually see what I'm looking at. But what I'm thinking would be great is let's keep primaries just a regular primary that we've always run, but instead of advancing 2 candidates, we advance 4. Open it up a little bit, and then kick those 4 people over to the general in a ranked choice voting ballot. And I think that's good for a couple reasons. I think we talk about, and there's a lot, some people do appreciate having a primary. And if we keep it to a top 4, it's going to open up more options, right? I just ran some numbers here, right? In our last, where am I? Here we go. I just kind of took a look back because I was curious. All right, in what ways has only picking 2 people in our primary, how has that impacted us? So I looked at 2 examples, right? Like in our 2023 executive race, the winners were, I think we had 34%, 27%, 17%, 16%. So 61% of people had somebody that they wanted between the top 2. So that still means that like 34% of people at the end of the day didn't ultimately get someone that they wanted. And I look at our at-large position in 2023, we had a similar scenario. We had 37% for the top winner, 30% for the second winner, which I think is actually Commissioner Ordos, 22% and then 8%. So 67% of people ultimately chose somebody who they wanted, but that still left 33% of people out. And then we go to the general, and I forget the exact numbers, I didn't look it up. Let's just say it's 51% to 49, even if that wasn't. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you have like a very small sliver of people who ultimately got to choose the person that they wanted to win. So in my thinking, it's like, all right, if we open it up to 4, building on the apparent success of Alaska, and then introduce the ranked choice voting in the general, we're still getting the advantages of a general election. I'm not gonna go over and espouse all the benefits of ranked choice voting. I think we've done that quite a bit. So I'm not gonna talk about all the reasons I think it's a good idea. But it also opens up a scenario where if only 3 people file for a primary, then we don't need to run the primary in that race. We can just kick it straight to the general. We're getting the cost savings from not having to run the primary. So it's kind of this compromise, right? Where we still get the benefits without upending the system a ton. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking. In the specific language I have here, I kind of detail out how that voting process would look. I think there's a lot of merit in us not specifying all the particulars about how ranked choice voting will work. I personally kind of like the idea of kicking it off to council to convene some sort of committee, similar to what Commissioner Morales has suggested, and kind of trust our bipartisan elected officials to figure out the specifics. And if there's guardrails that we want, like we really want this particular function to happen, we can detail that in the charter and then have them fill in the gaps. So that's roughly kind of that's in a nutshell, the proposal that I have. I would be super interested in working with any of you commissioners who think, hey, maybe that's a good idea. I kind of like that direction. There's a couple things that I would tweak to get me from a no to I might still be on the fence, but I think the voters ought to decide. Because that's really what I'm looking for. That's really what I'm looking to do here. If you're a no because you think it's going to cost more money, the commissioner or the auditor said what, $400,000, something like that. If that's your deal breaker, I can't argue against that, right? But if you're getting to that point where it's like, I fundamentally think this is a good idea, I'm just a little unsure of the execution, and I'm unsure if this is best for the voters. If you're kind of in that, I would love to work with you to get it to a point where you would trust our voters to make the call. So I look forward to bringing this proposal to you at the next commission meeting, perhaps. I'm happy to work with anybody here to get it to a place where it's gonna have the best shot. So I think the voters of Whatcom County deserve to have a say in this. And whatever model that ends up looking like, I think it's our responsibility to give it the option. So that's all I have.
Commissioner Coltonfeld, thank you for your time and your work on this. I was reminded by Commissioner Ellenboss, we have an unusual situation wherein his motion was still on the table to recommend to the commission the language as proposed by Commissioner Chris Jordan. We did that in a vote, but it also was an amendment. And so at this point, does anyone object to approving that motion by consent?
I just wanted to do a vibe check before we do that with the people who brought them here, and if they're wanting it to move forward or wanting more time for drafting. That's a possible thing to ask at this point in time.
I don't know that anything's impossible at this point in time, but we do have a motion on the table. I suppose we could have more discussion.
I just was wondering what your,
are you asking Commissioner?
let's just either.
I'm okay with,
Okay.
anyone who wants to give me input, awesome. I did my best to flesh it out really well, so it's ready for input.
Okay.
Okay, any objection to,
I have a question real quick.
Okay.
Would this be introduction at our next meeting? So we're gonna do this again at our next meeting?
Can I ask a question from, not quite, go ahead, out here. When do you want to hear from us? Because if we have comments out here in public,
yeah,
which I only found out that we were public. I didn't even know we got to come except from Facebook.
Yeah.
And it took me half an hour to find the place because it's not clear. So I didn't get to get on the docket. And I feel like a couple of things I have to say are relevant. If you're gonna vote first before the public, as it were, maybe other people need to speak too. It doesn't, where do we fit in? I guess is the question.
I hear that and I totally respect it. And we did say that we would make time for public comment at the end. Just to be clear, this vote, the vote is, normally our public comment is at the beginning, which we did.
I'm sorry.
We had our public comment at the beginning, but we had to cut that off for time.
Yes, I hear.
So I'm happy to hear what you have to say. This motion
No,
is,
it's, I want to be fair. I wasn't familiar.
but we do have it on our agenda to allow for more time. This particular piece is just taking longer, I think, than any of us could have hoped. So, but the motion is to recommend to bring this to the commission for the next meeting. So it's not a yes or no on the content. I just want to be fair to Commissioner Ellenboss, who did bring this motion some time ago. Does anyone object to approving this by consent?
And how is that
still voting no.
different from the vote that we just did?
Well, in that it was a motion on the table when the amendment came through, and I've been asked by the motioner to bring that vote through for process reasons. So I'm happy to. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, point of order. I feel like we amended the original motion and we voted for it, so I don't think your motion, I think we voted on it. Because we
voted on my amendment, is all we did.
But your
and now we've
amendment
got to go to the
changed
original
his-
motion.
It was
Yeah.
basically a substitute.
It altered it, but now we still have to vote
Okay,
on the
okay.
amendment as
Scratch what I
altered by
said.
mine.
Would anyone like this? Anyone like to request that this is done by a roll call vote, or shall we do it?
I request a roll call.
Okay.
Joe Carroll.
Yes.
Joe Ellenboss.
No.
Lindsey Graham Ellenboss. No. Colton Coltonfeld.
Yes.
Greg Kelly.
No.
Maya Morales. Yes. John Mutchler.
No.
Anna Ordos. No. Phil Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Andrew Redding.
Yes.
Jessica Rienstra. Yes. Jennifer Wright.
Yes.
Doug Chadwick.
No.
Eamon Collins.
Yes.
Shockingly, that's an 8-6 with one commissioner absent. I would love to take this opportunity to hear any public comment that folks would like to offer. Go ahead.
Could you stand up so we can hear you back there? I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, to Mr. Ellenboss, that I understand that you have a lot that you need to accomplish as a commission, and that this feels like it's big. But I did want to point out to you that those of us that voted for you guys had the opportunity to see that this was an issue that you were going to address because Mr. Redding and Liz put it on there. And there are those of us who have been waiting with bated breath for 25 years for this issue to show up. And I'm just kind of almost excited. It feels like progress to me. I'm progressive. And I understand the conservatives feel differently, and I respect it. But where we were coming from 25 years ago and wanting to have this happen in the year 2000 was seeing that in the county, there were a lot of people that weren't getting represented. They were independents, they were remember Freedom County, I think it was called? And there were, the Green Party was here back in 2000, and we started a group here in Bellingham called Whatcom County Voting for this issue, for instant runoff voting and proportional representation. And as it picked up a lot of energy, which it did, it got all the way to the state, it got to Olympia, and that is my understanding of where Washington voting started. Well, for a whole year, and this back in the day when we weren't on computers very much, we were all talking to each other on computers and it was slow. But we talked about this issue just exactly like we are today, backwards and forwards for a whole year. And then what happened was 9/11, and everything changed. The whole political scenario, everything changed, and we had to switch Washington Fair Voting to how do we get a secure ballot? And we ended up, and you heard about it today, we ended up being one of the first states in the US to get paper ballots so that we were sure that we would have a safe ballot. So all the energy, very similar to in the room today, that we had 25 years ago, got switched to that issue. And to me, because I'm old, it just feels like it just happened. But that's how long things take. I'm just trying to say that I'm here today because this man put it on Facebook, otherwise, because I didn't know the public got to speak. And I just think that it could be an extraordinary issue for us in our county and in our state to get more people voting, which is what I care about, because we don't really have a lot of people, like other democracies, we don't have a lot of people voting. And I really appreciate that you're all doing this, and we'll sit down. I'm an A voter, and I only missed one primary, and I'm really, really cared about voting for you guys. I just think that this is the way to do stuff.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Really appreciate everyone's patience through this process. And I know that Commissioner Ordos has something that's not germane, and for that reason, we do need a motion to close the committee of the whole.
So moved.
Prior to doing that, go ahead, Commissioner Falcone.
Yeah, I'm just curious here, and I kind of want to build on what Commissioner Elabas had kind of brought up earlier, right? Clearly, like for some of my colleagues, this is a very important issue. We put a lot of work in, like, to develop these proposals. There's been work that's been done behind the scenes to try to understand issues, try to reach out to some of you all. And I'm just curious. I'm gonna ask the one question here because I think it's worth it. Like, I'm just curious to get a straw poll. Is there any form of ranked choice voting, any form of compromise where you could potentially go from, where you could send this to the ballot, or you could send this to a ballot? Is there any form of ranked choice voting, any set of guardrails where you would feel comfortable sending this to a vote? I'm just curious because Commissioner Elabas is right. Like, we have a lot to do, and I really want to work at this, and I'm ready to compromise the heck out of this to get something that's going to make everybody happy. But I just need to make sure that there's an option.
So Commissioner Mutchler.
I'm going to try to answer that from my perspective. First of all, the observation that I think the prevailing side here, the majority, I should say, was given a gift. Now you have a sense as to where this thing's headed. Secondly, I would encourage those of you the four of you who have brought forth very thoughtful proposals on ranked choice voting, come up with a single plan that would unite the side that's in favor of it, and also perhaps be attractive to at least a couple more commissioners. So tonight was not a waste. Tonight moved the ball forward, so you'd see the task is ahead of you. And especially the four of you that brought forth proposals, is to put your heads together and come up with a proposal at the next meeting that's gonna unite. You need 10. And so you have, you know what your work is set out for you tonight.
So is that you could be convinced? Very politician answer, John.
Of course I could. I'm impressed when there's two sides debating. Again, I was disappointed there wasn't somebody, because when the other side's weak and they come and defend it, you see right through it. And that's why I'm surprised that we didn't have somebody defending the other position, the traditional position. I think that would have been worked well here, but didn't happen.
Commissioner Ordos. So I think maybe my comment I was reserving towards the end of the discussion is probably more relevant now.
Oh, go for it.
First of all, I understand the large amount of work that my colleagues have put into, I mean, I've been listening to ranked choice voting scenarios since we were running for charter. So, but I wanted to share kind of my perspective of how this meeting started. And I want to put this in a way that's probably less words than maybe what I'm feeling about it. But the way this meeting started was my fellow commissioner, Collins, kind of came out and I wrote down some notes that you pulled out an email that was representative of an individual that didn't agree with ranked choice voting. And I feel like that example was taken out and you said, well, this clearly was ChatGPT and it completely dismissed not only that individual who put that forward to the charter as their perspective. Maybe they did run it through ChatGPT because they didn't have words that they felt sounded professional enough or detailed enough for us to take seriously. And I feel like we did a disservice by kind of making a mockery out of that email, which I would have never have done that to the individuals that emailed us that wanted ranked choice voting by dismissing it, saying, well, it's individuals from Fair Vote Washington that, sent out an email and got everybody to, I wouldn't do that because it's still our constituents that are sharing their perspective, whether there was an email chain that was sent out, however it was that motivated them to make their voice heard, they had the courage to share with us. But I think also in essence, by doing that with that one email, we also dismissed folks that I know and I represent the people of District 4. I do not represent an agenda. I didn't come forward with any preconceived notions of what I wanted to do on charter because I wanted it. But I spent a lot of time talking to constituents in District 4 and I reached out and I talked about ranked choice voting. And you made a comment about Republican versus Democrat. And I wanted to, and I'm only speaking for myself, that a wise person once told me labels are for clothing, not for people. And just because you view me in a certain way of my political preference doesn't mean that I'm in an echo chamber about ranked choice voting. As someone representing the people of my district, I went and watched majority votes alongside many of you. I went to the presentation about ranked choice voting given by the League of Women Voters. I have thoughtfully went through, I've had many conversations with Kit in the past about show me some other sides of ranked choice voting too, because only presenting the good things about ranked choice voting creates skeptics because there's a downside to everything we do. We walk across the street, there's a downside, we're gonna get hit. And if we're not openly and transparently sharing that, then we will never have a discussion amongst all of us that's meaningful and representative of the people. It's just representative of what we think our party might think. And I spent a considerable amount of time thoughtfully thinking about ranked choice voting. So I wanted to let you know, I kind of took offense to being labeled as being in an echo chamber about what we think Republicans or conservatives think about ranked choice voting. So I think for me, I'm speaking to Commissioner Machin, what he had to say is that I was disappointed that this kind of felt like a one-side presentation, and maybe that was on individuals who maybe, didn't want it, should have brought forth, presenters to talk about that. But I think we set it off as a disservice, dismissing any of the constituents that had questions or concerns about what ranked choice voting is, and then minimizing it like it's really a choice about cookies. I've heard so many individuals say it's so simple. It's a 5-year-old can understand. So what did you just say about the individuals that were confused about this process? We just said, you're too dumb to figure it out. It's cookies, a 5-year-old can understand. And I just feel like that's so offensive to the people that we're representing. There are still people that will walk away tonight feeling confused about either the process or the cost, and their voice matters. And it doesn't mean we regulated them down to a primary classroom, of children that don't get it. I do think there's complexities in this, and I think it's fair that we discuss those in a way that's mature and respectful for the people that may not be agreeing with the consensus here. So that was what I wanted to share. Thank you.
You guys talk, Mr. Collins and Mr. Morales, go ahead.
I don't want to, get into a back and forth, but I just want to say I would not. I never have brought up a letter we got from a constituent before, and I wouldn't have commented on that. We've got all sorts of things we don't agree with. A constituent didn't write that. And my point was, I said, I too will go to, when we have these tech tools at our fingertips, they are reinforcing. I said, I too go to ChatGPT and say, hey, what are some reasons I should oppose this? It was an entry point to talk about how we, and I said me, said we, don't can hear a term, we associate it with another side when we are stuck in this in this polarity, this only two sides, and we end up not thinking about it, and that's why I just wanted to start with some of the basics. It was an attempt to point out why we should talk about the specific mechanisms, because I think it is easy to gloss over those.
Mr. Morales.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing your concern. Honestly, because I actually phrased it that too slightly, the ChatGPT comment, but that's for my own tech justice reasons, totally unrelated to your thing. But I do feel like I want to explain the cookie thing, which is just like, I am not a video animator. I cannot make a video that explains it.
That
And
wasn't
so
directly towards.
okay, I just wanted to let you know
We've been
that.
talking about candy and cookies. for
Yeah, I hear that.
several
I just want you all
Request
to
we
know
return
that
to the orders of the day.
I
Madam
have
Chair.
the floor and I'd like to finish
It's a
speaking.
privilege
So,
request. We're just going on and on. I request we return to the orders of the day.
Heard. Are you able to wrap it up?
I'm able to wrap it up. I just wanted to say that I certainly don't intend that in any type of like dumbing down or anything type of way. It's just literally trying to show folks the percentages. And so I want to be very clear that my intent is not to make anyone feel like I don't feel that they're capable of understanding at all. So, thank you.
In order to close out of this, for one unrelated thing that has come to my attention, we need a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole. Motion to adjourn the committee of the whole.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, last thing that I have, unless anyone else has anything. A request to add a meeting Thursday, May 29th. So we have this little blue sheet here that is the remaining schedule of our meetings. This request has a lot to do with what Commissioner Ellenboss and Commissioner Kaltenfeld noted. We have a lot to do. And so adding that Thursday, May 29th would allow for one more meeting of introduction, because we have a deadline for getting the language to legal. So.
Here?
here in this place? I think so.
Can I don't know if it's possible, but could I request that, oh, we can't meet in the library, 'cause it's too late,
I
right?
think what they
Yeah.
I hate this noise so much that when it
So
goes
you're
on.
all the 23rd.
I would like to make a motion to add the meeting on May 29th here to our schedule. Second.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So we would be able to submit until the Thursday before at noon for something to be introduced at that and voted on to be for an introduction at that meeting.
And that would be the for
The
real deal
22nd.
cutoff, yes, but it would give us a little more time so that we're not here until midnight.
Oh, so we're
next week.
stretching our cutoff.
Adding one more meeting allows commissioners one more chance to propose amendments and or do the work of the amendments that have been proposed.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any objection to approving that by consent? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. The next meeting will be on Thursday, May 22nd at 6 PM at the Garden Room. Mr. Ellenboss, can you let me, do we need yet another motion to adjourn this thing that we're doing?
Yeah, to adjourn.
Okay, can you
Can
you help me?
As chair, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Just a second. Okay, any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned at 9:37. Thanks everyone for being here. You're amazing. Appreciate you.